There we go. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Board of Regents meeting, and I'm going to ask Kristen, not Megan, to please call the roll.
Regent Adams, Regent Adongo, Regent Bogost,
Here.
Regent Brankus, Regent Cologne,
Here.
Regent Goydam,
Here.
Regent Cruiser,
Present.
Regent Manydeeds,
Here.
Regent Nixon,
Here.
Regent Peterson, Regent Prince,
Present.
Regent Rye,
Here.
Regent Salzwedel,
Here.
Regent Trainer, Regent Tyler, Regent Underly,
Here.
Regent Walsh,
Here.
and Regent Weatherly.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I also want to say if anybody needs to stand up, including regents, and take a break, please do. It's hard to sit for lengths of time. As we consider items on today's agenda, are there board members who wish to declare any conflicts of interest regarding today's open session agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed. The records of the November 7th, 8th, 2024 meeting of the UW System Board of Regents have been provided. Are there any corrections? Okay, hearing none, the minutes are approved as distributed. Okay, let's see. Okay. To start things off, I believe President Rothman has some updates and introductions.
I do, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce Chris Patton, who has joined the Universities of Wisconsin as Interim Vice President of University Relations. Chris comes to us most recently from UW-Platteville, where he served as Vice Chancellor of Administration and Finance. Prior to his work at Platteville, Chris was Deputy Secretary of the Department of Administration. Chris, a UW River Falls graduate, has also served as Administration Operations Director at Epic Systems and as a Policy Director for Governor Jim Doyle. Welcome, Chris. Would you please stand so we can acknowledge you? It is really great to have Chris on our team, and I know we all look forward to working with him. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize the service and contributions of a longtime and dedicated colleague, Ginger Hintz, our Associate Vice President for Finance and System-Wide Controller. After nearly 32 years of service to the Universities of Wisconsin, Ginger is retiring. She worked at UW-Oshkosh for about 9 years as an auxiliary accountant and then joined UW administration in 1997, where she has held numerous positions, including Senior Accountant and Director of Financial Reporting, before assuming her current role. Her input and impact over the years have been impressive. Ginger was integral to UW's efforts to automate much of our annual accrual-based financial statements. Other key projects include the significant enhancement of UW's payment card industry compliance, development of financial reports for the board, such as budget to actual reports and PR balance reports, and analyzing financial ratios for our UW universities. She continues to be critical in our implementation of Workday, reviewing and designing business processes, evaluating financial accounting structures, and analyzing future accounting entries. I'd also like to point out that Ginger received the Central Association of College and University Business Officers President's Award in 2022. This award is given to a member of that organization who has made outstanding contributions to the organization over a sustained period of time. Ginger also served as on the organization's board of directors for several years. All this goes to say, Ginger has made a real difference in her time at the Universities of Wisconsin. Consistent with her role as a steward, she is leaving the UWs better than she found them. And for that, we are grateful, and we now wish her the very best in her retirement years. And Ginger, would you please stand so that we can recognize you? And with that, it's back to you, President Bogost.
Thank you very much. And this will be the last meeting for our student, Regent Evan Brankus. He will be graduating next weekend from UW Green Bay with a major in First Nation Studies and a minor in mathematics. Evan is planning to begin graduate school studies at UW Green Bay in the spring without having to take a break, which is amazing. We'll have a few more words to say about Evan tomorrow, but now our heartfelt congratulations to him. Next, we have a report from the Wisconsin Technical College System Board has been provided to the Regents. Are there any comments or questions? Okay. Next, I have an update to share on several ongoing chancellor searches. At UW-Oshkosh, a 14-member search and screen committee was recently appointed to help identify the successor to Chancellor Andy Levitt. Regent Ashok Rai will chair the committee, with Andrew Smock, an associate professor in the Department of Radio, TV, Film in the College of Letters and Science, as vice chair. 5 other regents will also serve on this committee: Regents Desmond Adongo, Haben Goydam, Jim Cruiser, Timothy Nixon, and Karen Walsh. They will work alongside members of the UW-Oshkosh faculty and staff, as well as members of the community, to determine and interview candidates. A special regent committee will then review candidates presented by the Search and Screen Committee, and the special regent committee will again be chaired by Regent Rai and include the 5 other regents, just as I mentioned. The executive search firm of Storbeck Search, DSG Global, will assist the committee throughout the search process. And Regent Rai, do you have any other things to update us
Just want to
with?
thank the Search and Screen Committee and everybody that's been involved. We're off and running. Our charge meeting was Monday, and our first listening sessions will happen this Monday, and very excited to hear from the community and the campus.
That's great, thank you. Turning to UW-Milwaukee, UWM's chancellor search officially opened on November 11th. Following the naming of a 16-member search and screen committee, Regent Joan Prince will chair that committee, with Jillian Roger, chair and professor of the Department of Music in the Peck School of the Arts, as vice chair. 4 other regents will serve: Regents Hector Colon, Jack Salzweedl, Kyle Weatherly, and myself, again working with members of the UWM faculty and staff, a student, and members of the community. Listening sessions for UW-Milwaukee's chancellor search were held for students, faculty, and instructional academic staff, local business leaders and community members, and non-instructional academic staff and university staff 2 weeks ago, so November 18th through the 20th. A survey collecting listening session feedback will be open on UW-Milwaukee's chancellor search website until December 15th. The deadline to ensure consideration of applications will be January 27th, 2025, with the Search and Screen Committee starting their review of applications in early January. Semi-finalist interviews are expected to be held later in February. And Regent Prince, do you have anything to share?
Thank you, Regent. If I turn it on, I might be able to share. Thank you, Regent President Bogost. The only thing that I would add is that there is an excitement. We have a great search firm with Kiefer, who has let us know that information and folks are interested, and so we look forward to bringing to campus individuals to pump up the Panthers at UWM. So stay tuned and we'll keep you informed.
Wonderful, thank you. Now turning to the Regents Business Partnership Awards, and I just want to say it was Regent Walsh that initiated the Business Partnership Awards, and I really want to emphasize how important it is our businesses throughout the state that partner with us to provide so many wonderful things to our students and our campuses, and in return they get incredible students that they can hire and have internships with, and it's just, the program itself has been great to highlight these experiences for our campuses. We continue to recognize how UW universities are building strong relationships with businesses in support of our students and communities. Since our September meeting, we have presented 6 more awards. In October, Regents Business Partnership Awards were presented to UW Superior and Superior Choice Credit Union, recognizing a partnership that enhances financial literacy and creates more opportunities for both students and community members. The awards were presented at the newly opened Superior Choice Credit Union Stadium on the UW Superior campus. Regent Ed Menides was the board presenter. Next, UW River Falls Interfacial, a company that produces compounds for customers in the medical, consumer, transportation, and construction markets, were also recognized. Interfacial, a key player in the St. Croix Valley, has hired numerous UW River Falls alumni and it currently employs 16 university interns. Regents Tim Nixon, Haben Goydam, and Mark Tyler were all on hand for that award. To close out the month of October, Regent Business Partnership Awards were presented to UW-Platteville and the A.Y. McDonald Manufacturing Company. A.Y. McDonald has supported the university in its metals processing technology program through philanthropic contributions, engagement with faculty for continued education, and by hiring interns and graduates. There are currently more than 20 alumni employed at the company. And Regent Jack Salzwedel was on site for that presentation. 3 additional sets of awards were presented in November, starting with UW-Whitewater and UW Credit Union. UW Credit Union has been a longtime valued partner of the university, providing financial literacy training for students, providing employee volunteers for the Special Olympics, which have been held at Whitewater the last 2 years, and supporting Warhawks athletics. And Regent Tim Nixon was on hand for that award. Regent Business Partnership Awards are also presented to UW-Oshkosh and ThedaCare. ThedaCare is one of the largest employers in the Northeast and Central Wisconsin region and has worked closely with educational partners to grow the pipeline to expand the number of much-needed healthcare professionals graduating each year. Overall, about 300 UW-Oshkosh alumni are employed at ThedaCare. That's a lot of alumni. Regent Desmond Dongo took part in that presentation. And finally, Regent Business Partnership Awards were also presented last month to UW Green Bay and Camera Corner Connecting Point. As part of its partnership with the university, Camera Corner Connecting Point, the oldest technology store in Northeast Wisconsin, has helped create a scholarship endowment, supported the UW-GB athletics program, and currently employs more than a dozen alumni. And Regent Angela Adams helped to present that award. Congratulations to all the award winners. These partnerships are clearly a win-win for our universities and students, as well as the business communities. Thank you to everybody that helped out, including Regents Angela Adams, Desmond Adongo, Jim Cruiser, Ed Menides, Tim Nixon, Jack Sulzwedel, and Karen Walsh, along with other regents who attended the presentations to help celebrate our business partners. And finally, while we're on site to present these and other Regent Business Awards in the past year or so, we took the opportunity to interview a number of alumni about what their UW's journey means to them. To hear a sampling of what they had said, here's a brief video.
I toured other colleges. I took a little peek at Stevens Point and knew within the first 5 minutes it was where I wanted to be. It just felt like a second home.
I was a non-traditional student. I'm a little bit older, and so having the support that I'd received from Parkside, I attribute a lot of my success to.
It was a really big phase of self-discovery for me, so I feel like UW La Crosse really gave me the avenue to try new things and figure out who I am as a person.
Explore new things, explore new areas, meet new people, and then grow into myself.
The leadership roles that I was able to have here really were a game changer and kind of set my footing towards my future.
Sal gave me a great opportunity to really challenge myself and also see what I could do with my career.
The differing degrees and classes, the coursework that we could do, I really feel that helped set me up for success down the road.
Utilize those hard skills and soft skills that I got from UW Green Bay, which is really cool.
Being able to learn specifically about the foundry science at UW-Platteville and then apply that, because I'm the foundry engineer at AY, in my job every day.
It advanced me to positions where I could be more effective, take that technical background I had, and then move me into more of a leadership role.
It was really a process of growth for me, a process of really understanding critical thinking, a process of really understanding how to try to make my way through the world.
It's a community, it really is, and it's phenomenal. It means everything. It's who I am today. So.
That was wonderful, and it really highlights the importance of these partnerships. I mean, to have all these alumni working at these businesses that impact our entire state is truly remarkable. So that concludes my report for today, and now I will return back to President Rothman.
Great. Thank you. I'd just like to open my report with a few legislative updates. Starting on the federal side, I recently traveled to Washington for meetings with the Wisconsin congressional delegation. As always, I appreciated the members' willingness to meet during a busy time of the year and their commitments to and interest in our universities. In each of these meetings, I was able to discuss the value of the universities of Wisconsin and the importance of fully funding our federal priorities like the Pell Grant and other student financial aid as Congress looks to fund the government both through the remainder of the current fiscal year and the next. Throughout the conversations, I heard from our delegation about the value they see across our universities and the ways that we can work together as the 119th Congress commences in January. Without question, it will be an interesting 2025 in DC, but I am hopeful that we have partners in Washington who are committed to our universities and who know that we will continue to advocate for our students and the communities that we are privileged to serve. Also on the federal side, I wanted to provide a brief update on FAFSA, the new and improved free application for student aid, which had such a disastrous rollout last year, is now open for all students. This follows a phased rollout that began on October 1st with tens of thousands of students participating in several rounds of beta testing. In early returns, the Department of Education reported 80% of the completers are giving a 4 to 5-star rating on a scale of 1 to 5 to their experience with the 2025-2026 FAFSA form. I'm told that there are still some glitches to work out, and there is no doubt some lingering stress and anxiety in our financial aid offices from last year's experience. And again, we have to thank those people for doing extraordinary work last year to get into this year to get students the financial aid to which they are entitled. But officials in Washington are hopeful that the number of FAFSA completions will rebound going forward with a corresponding bump in enrollment. For now, the UWs continue to prepare to receive and process completed FAFSAs. With the 25-26 version officially released, our universities will ramp up marketing efforts to encourage prospective and continuing students to complete the form. And now on the state side. Statewide elections were, of course, held on November 5th. The entire state assembly and half of the Senate were up for re-election. In the end, the Republicans kept the majority in both chambers, with the Democrats picking up 4 seats in the Senate and 10 seats in the Assembly. The Senate now has an 18-15 Republican majority, and the Assembly, the Republican majority there is 54-45. Party leadership going into the 2025-26 session will largely stay the same, with the exception of newly elected Senate President Mary Felkowski. Senator Felkowski and I have a good working relationship, and I am excited to be working with her in her new leadership role. In addition to Senator Felkowski's election, Speaker Robin Vos, Senate Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu, Senate Minority Leader Diane Hasselbein, Assembly Majority Leader Tyler August, and Assembly Minority Leader Greta Neubauer were all re-elected to their leadership roles. Yesterday, Senate Joint Finance Committee appointments were made with 3 new Republican senators filling 3 vacancies. Senator Julian Bradley, Senator Rob Staffsholt, and Senator Romaine Quinn will fill those vacancies. Senator Pat Teston was newly appointed as the Senate Vice Chair of JFC, with Senator Howard Markline being reappointed as the Senate Co-Chair, and Senator Eric Weinberger and Senator LaToya Johnson and Senator Kelda Roys were also reappointed to the Joint Finance Committee. As we head into the new legislative session, I am eager to continue to work to serve the state of Wisconsin. As you are aware, the 25-27 biennial budget process starts next year. Back in August, this board, and I'm thankful for that, approved an $855 million operating budget and a substantial capital budget request for the next biennium. These are investments that are necessary to ensure that the universities of Wisconsin can continue to serve the state of Wisconsin effectively. Early in the 25-26 legislative session, the governor will introduce his budget proposal. Governor Evers has sent a letter to the Senate and Assembly leadership requesting possible dates for his State of the State and his budget address. He is requesting either January 22nd or 28th for the State of the State, and either February 25th or March 4th for the budget address. From there, the Joint Finance Committee will meet to vote on budgetary items. We have been and will continue to be engaged with the legislature as the budget process moves forward. I am ready to build on positive conversations I have had with legislators about the value of the universities of Wisconsin and the value that they bring to our entire state. Transitioning now to the Legislative Study Committee on the future of the University of Wisconsin system. That committee recently wrapped up its work. 5 hearings were held over the last few months with members voting on a wide range of proposals related to the future of our universities. Members voted on a primary ballot at the October 24 Study Committee hearing, and a secondary ballot was sent out, and we just got the results of this supplemental ballot yesterday. There were many recommendations, but let me share one takeaway that we have been watching very closely. The study committee did vote to pass by an 11-3 vote, with 4 members not voting, by 11-3 vote to support exploring granting some level of bonding authority to the universities of Wisconsin. This is an important initiative. It is one that is set forth in our strategic plan. It is one that we will advocate for our universities. The Ledge Council will be preparing a final report of the committee's recommendations later this winter, based on both the first and supplemental ballots. I expect that items discussed during the study committee will arise in conversations as we have them with the legislators in this coming session. I do appreciate the hard work and time that committee members put into these important topics that have a direct impact on our universities. Finally, we just learned that the Senate Universities and Revenue hearing has, the Senate Universities and Revenue Committee will have a hearing next week on Wednesday, December 11th, and it will include testimony from our own Green Bay Chancellor, Mike Alexander, so we look forward to that. The end of the year is also a very busy time for our universities, but it's also a very exciting time, especially for many students. In coming weeks, about 10,000 students all around the universities of Wisconsin are expected to receive their hard-earned UW degrees. These graduates are the workers, the leaders, and the innovators who will define the economy and culture of this great state moving forward. And the education they received at one of our UW universities has prepared them well. And I think you heard that on the video clip that Amy just played. I'd just like to extend my personal congratulations to the final cohort of the class of 2024, and I wish them great success. At the same time, I would also like to thank the faculty and staff and university committees and communities and families who have supported these students as they progressed through their UW experience. We know you all played a key role in helping these 10,000 students begin their stories of great success. About 6 of Regents will be participating in various UW commencements around the state this month. And if to the Regents, if you haven't yet had that pleasure, this is truly a special moment to be a part of. It really is. Finally, I'd like to close my report with some really extraordinary news from our flagship UW Madison. Madison learned last week that it has moved up 2 places to 6th out of over 900 public and private universities in the United States in university research expenditures, according to the National Science Foundation's annual rankings. They've gone from 8th to 6th in the Herd rankings. That is truly an extraordinary move, and it is just absolutely great to hear. For the first time, UW-Madison has topped $1.7 billion in research expenditures. NSF's data show a 13.7% increase in research expenditures at UW-Madison over the previous fiscal year. That's an increase of more than $208 million for the period covering July 2022 through June 2023. Nearly half of UW-Madison's $1.7 billion in total research expenditures comes from federal awards from agencies such as NSF, the National Institutes of Health, and the Department of Defense. This is a terrific accomplishment, and we can all be proud of our flagship. And I offer my personal congratulations to Chancellor Mnuchin, Provost Isbell, and the entire Madison campus community. And with that, concludes my report. Back to you, President Bogost.
Thank you, President Rothman. I just want to say on behalf of my Regent colleagues as well, that we're all very proud of all the graduates this December. It's quite an accomplishment. So I just wanted to see if there are any questions or comments from the Regents on President Rothman's report. See if we have any. No. Okay. Moving on, now we'll hear a progress report on the University of Wisconsin 5-year strategic plan. President Rothman, would you please start us off, and we'll give you a moment
I
to
will if you
gather
give
the
me 2 minutes
team.
to get around the table.
We'll give you 2.5. There we go. Okay.
Grab your name tags. Is it bad to say that I like the other end of the table better? But no, good afternoon. I am delighted to share the updates on our strategic plan and where we're at. As you know, the plan was approved almost 2 years ago after a development process that took over 6 months and involved input from various stakeholders across our universities and beyond, and including very important feedback from this Board of Regents. As part of that process, we undertook a typical SWOT analysis and identified some of the challenges that we were facing, including enrollment, both demographics and participation rate. That means the rate of high school students going on to higher education. We know we face challenges around enrollment and achievement gaps for URM and low-income students. We know we had below-market compensation for many of the faculty and staff, which quite frankly masks what our structural deficits really are. We knew that we had declining public perception in the value of higher education, a declining state support on an inflation-adjusted basis, and structural deficits at a number of our universities. But in that, we also saw opportunities to serve the state of Wisconsin and help the state win the war for talent. We saw opportunities about providing social mobility for our students because we know that education changes the trajectory of people's lives. We knew we had opportunities to advance knowledge, and I think you just heard about one great example of that with our flagship. And we knew we had the opportunity to ensure that our students had freedom of expression, that our faculty had academic freedom, but we knew we also had an opportunity to improve civil dialogue. So as you look at the 5-year plan, and I would encourage you in terms of that high-level overview, to look at it stepping back from some of the specifics and really look at what we're trying to do from a 60,000-foot level. If you think about it and you look through the initiatives in the plan, it is focused on increasing enrollment, retention, and graduation rates to help Wisconsin win that war for talent, to help us provide social mobility for our students. A second major theme that runs through the plan is that we want to maintain excellence. We want to maintain academic excellence. A third piece is that we knew we need to achieve long-term financial sustainability and viability if we are going to be here to serve the state in the long run. We knew we wanted to drive research and create new knowledge because that's one of the great functions that our universities perform. And we wanted to make sure that we continue to ensure the existence of freedom of expression and civil dialogue. I am proud today of the work that my team sitting up here has done, but all of my folks at UW administration, but also, and importantly so, our universities. Because at the end of the day, it happens at our universities. And we are in this together, and the work that the chancellors have done, the provosts have done, the leadership, the faculty throughout has been, I think, extraordinary as we've started to move ourselves forward. So today we're going to spend some time just giving the board an update. I'm joined by Johannes Britz. Johannes is the Senior Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs. Julie Gordon, our Vice President for Finance and Administration. Chris Patton, our Vice President for University Relations. And Jack Jablonski, the Associate Vice President for Public Affairs, Communications, and Branding. We are also joined by Ben Passmore, Associate Vice President of the Office of Policy Analysis and Research, and Ben serves as our data analytics guru and provides us great assistance, and you will see that in the presentation today. But before I get to talking about strategy itself, I think it's important to step back because when we worked on the strategy, and those of you who were on the board at the time may remember, we talked a lot about defining our core values. And there's an old management guru by the name of Peter Drucker who has said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I absolutely believe that because I've seen that in action. So our focus on culture is part and parcel with our strategic plan execution. That if we don't have the culture right, we're not going to be able to execute successfully our strategic plan. And you can see our core values. We talk about our core values, and we do our best to live our core values, because at the end of the day, how we live those core values or fail to live those core values define our culture. And if I were to pick one of those core values to focus on, it's the commitment to stewardship. And that is the focus on leaving the organization better than we found it. And if we make every single decision in that regard, that we're leaving it better than we found it, we can do and will continue to do great things. As you know in the plan, and I'm not going to go through there are 4 core objectives, and from that flow 9 different strategies that we're going to walk through. The team up here today is going to walk through those and share where we think we are at relative to our progress against our objectives. They will share some tactics that we have been employing, but we're not going to be able to cover everything in the time that we have allotted, but we wanted to give you that view. I think it's also important to note as you look at our strategic plan at the UW administration side, keep in mind there are 13 universities have their own strategic plans below this. And their plans over time are evolving to try to tie into the UW administration plan. But there is so much work that is absolutely essential that goes on at our universities. And I again thank them for their efforts. I encourage the Regents to ask questions as we go along and not wait until the end. Our hope is that we have a dialogue today and not just a PowerPoint presentation. So I encourage you to ask questions. One other preliminary matter before we go, when you have seen the deck, you have noted we have used the green light, yellow light, red light designation to indicate where we think our status is against our plan. And I just wanted to define how we have used those. Green, meaning that we are currently on target to meet our goal by the end of 2028. Yellow is that we are making some progress, but we have to accelerate that progress if we are going to achieve our ultimate goal. And then finally, the red light means we are not on track to achieve our goal. So with that, it is my privilege to turn the presentation over to Johannes, who will drive us from here.
Thank you very much, President Rothman. Thank you very much, Regents, for the opportunity. I would say, as you would say, Mr. President, I would rather sit over there. But it's actually my pleasure to share with you where we are with the strategic plan. It's not easy just to do the presentation, but it's actually very exciting when you really see the work that we as a whole universities of Wisconsin are actually moving forward with what we firmly believe in, is being in education. The first strategy, as you can see on the screen, is we will increase access to higher education and improve rates of success for historically underserved students. And if you look at that strategy, we have set ourselves very specific goals. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to just read off the screen, I'm going to make it a bit shorter, but I can tell you on strategy 1, the first goal we have, we want to close the participation gap of underrepresented students. And what I can tell you, we have exceeded the target from 23 and 24. So it's pretty much a green light. We also, as goal 2, want to increase Pell-eligible Wisconsin students to 35,000 by 2028. We've exceeded again 23 target for 25. Where we have a yellow or orange dot is we want to increase the first generation new freshman enrollment. We're kind of flat. I asked Ben, are we down? He said, well, at that number, you pretty much can say we are flat. And then we also, as another goal, we want to significantly reduce the retention as well as the graduation gap for our underserved students. And if you look what if we achieved, our second-year retention of underrepresented minority and Pell students have increased to pre-pandemic levels, but there's still a gap that remains, as well as that our graduation rate gaps have narrowed for our underserved students. On the tactics, these are the things that we do in my offices, but also on other and mainly also on campuses. I also want to do a shout out for my provost colleagues for their input and the hard work they do on the campuses. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm just going to highlight one or two or three of the tactics that we are doing. First of all, the implementation and the hard work and the heavy lift for direct admits. Thank you to my office, Julie Amon sitting over there. If there are any questions, I do have the managerial skill to delegate if there are questions that I don't know necessarily the answer. But what I can report out to you also, a shout out to DPI, Regent Jill, for your support, working with the high schools. We had 300 high schools plus minus that participated. And if you compare that to Minnesota when they started, it was 44 schools. That's a heavy lift. We did send out 25,000 letters of admits. And when I asked Julie, when are we going to know the results? He said, by September, when we know who steps in the door of the universities. Don't say anything now because we don't know. We just know that we have seen an increase of number of admits to our campuses. But the true impact of direct admits, we will see later. I want to mention a few things about the affordability study as well as the tuition promise. I do think these are three very, well, if you include the direct admit, significant initiatives that we are taking. Ben's shop is working, his Office of the Policy Analysis and Research will finalize the affordability study soon. Ben, is that correct? I do encourage you, if you get it, take time to read it. We're very affordable in the state. We're one of the best and the most affordable university systems within the Midwest. But for me, very significant what Ben in his report reports out is that we have seen, since we have introduced the tuition promise, the Wisconsin tuition promise 2 years ago, the 2023-24, when we started to move on that, we have seen an increase in the number of Wisconsin new freshman Pell students that came to our universities, also an increase in the number of first-generation students, as well as an increase in the number of underrepresented minority students. And when I look at that, that really gives me a lot of hope to say a tuition promise plus a direct admit is going to make a difference, because we can see the needle as it's moving there. And that explains also why we actually, when we got the grant from Ascendium, to say, it's not a lot of money, but it's certainly a starting point not to let it just go and say, how can we work with us as the Universities of Wisconsin administration, as well as the campuses, to continue at least another tuition promise. And that's also why it is in the budget, because I truly believe a tuition promise can make a huge impact as we move forward. On strategy 2, you can see the strategy reads that we will champion student success across the higher education life cycle. We have set ourselves very specific goals there. Firstly, we want to ensure that all undergraduate students participate in 2 or more high-impact practices. I can just tell you as Regents, you might know this already, students who engage in high-impact practices, specifically research, are just so much more successful in their studies and completion of their degree. If you see where we are up, and actually in comparison to the national average, our internship and field experience is much higher than the national average. When we look specifically then at increased participation in undergraduate in research activities with faculty to 25% at each university, and I know Ben Shop is working to collect all the data from our campuses, we have again exceeded our national average significantly, and 8 of our 13 universities are already meeting the target. So we are on track with that. Also very encouraging is that our use of Navigate, we want to double the number of proactive Navigate engagements. And if you look at that number, our undergraduate student engagement with Navigate since 2020, that's when we did the survey till now, more than doubled from 37% to 81%. Since we introduced the strategic plan, it moved up from 66% to that 81%. A lot of hard work from our campuses to engage our students, our faculty, and our staff in the use of Navigate, which is just that platform for communication, for advising, for students to plan and to engage with faculty as well as their advisors. It's difficult to do justice to what we do in the field to implement and promote use of virtual well-being programs. A lot of work is happening. John Achter is not here today in person, but he and his shop did tremendous work with the campuses, because one of the biggest needs that we have seen specifically since COVID is mental health and mental health. We got the APRA money. We got money also from the governor. We invested that in mental health, and you college funded through 2025. It's in the budget. There's a huge request. Right, I think it's a 22 million request in the biennium budget for mental health support on our campuses. And then one that I had to look, what is Together All online peer support? It simply means it's students talking to one another. And it's also moderated by clinicians 24/7. But that helped a lot for students to interact with other students who have the same problem. Then we also have a goal to increase learner enrollment in our online programs to 24,000. At this point, we're at about 94%. I think we're going to reach that target sooner than we think, because I looked at the number and I will share that a little bit with you. What do we do in our online space? So those are the goals as well as the results. When you really look at the tactics, I just want to highlight again a few there. Navigate, I've talked a little bit about that. We renewed the contract. But then on the, you will see there is an advising assessment workshop. And I don't want to say too much about that other than it's actually next week. Because when I did my preparations, I said, when did this happen? No, it's going to happen next week. The 18th of December, Chancellor Tom, you know it's going to happen on your campus. We're going to actually have all the advisors there, and they're actually going to evaluate with key experts in the nation on how to do the assessment of advising programs. And they're going to have teams there. That's just something I thought I would want. It's actually in the works as we speak. Then I want to talk a little bit about the mental health, just to say, for the first time, we have created, with President Rothman's approval, and the request from actually our mental health advisors on our campuses, a President's Advisory Committee. First time. And that committee will actually advise the President of all key issues as it relates to mental health and how we can actually support our students. We will continue, of course, in mental health space to roll out our mental health well-being services, the online, continue with Together All online peer support. And as I mentioned in the budget, we asked for $22 million, mainly to increase the number of counseling staff. We're way behind in terms of the ratio to students, as also some salary adjustments, and then supplemental telehealth services for our students. So I think that's a very critical investment that I was so happy to see that in our budget.
Can I just interrupt you? I'm sorry. I didn't know if I heard that right about you're way beyond with advisories or advisors. You said that we have.
We don't have
than the
enough
average?
counselors.
We don't have.
Yeah, so
Okay, I just want to clarify.
the ratio should be about 1 to 1,000.
What is it now?
I'm not sure. Julie, do you know the number? I know we need to add another 12 or 57 counselors, right?
It varies by campus.
Right.
So some are actually in a good space, others down below.
Thank you.
And I can provide you the data. I just know in the
Yeah.
budget we asked for 57 additional counselors to support to get to that ratio, which is the national average.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Then on the, I want to talk a little bit about the Wisconsin online portal. I did ask for my colleague just to update me on the numbers. As you know, about a year ago, we have this portal now, first time ever, really wonderful, integrated. We're a one-stop shop. You can really see what we offer, more than 200 programs as of the last year. And that's why I said I'm much more optimistic about our online enrollments. We have seen 245,000 unique users to that site, just unique one-time users that actually click and go to campuses. Then we have seen actually 560,000 double clicks, like students come back and they really want to see what we offer. And also on our portal, not a campus portal, because we don't really know what's really happening on campuses when they actually want to look at Whitewater online program. They don't go necessarily through our portal. We had 780 requests for more information from our portal that then automatically link to the CRM of a campus. And then also what we have added most recently, about 3 months ago. We have now also have a portal for 120 plus of our graduate certificate programs, which we never had. And it is a kind of a convoluted space because a graduate certificate program is so tailored and different. And to get it all in one portal was a hard work, but it's there. So hopefully we will also see an increase in students can pick better and be much more informed as they relink to our campuses. We have now a marketing plan for our online space, and I really pushed hard for our folks to go out of state for online and international, because it's not a visa issue. You have a professional degree, you want to come and do a master's in computer science, you live in India, you don't just want to come here. There are options that I don't think we have maximized, so we really look at the international market as well. Then you will see one of the dots there is My Majors. I just want to briefly tell you, My Majors is just a software program that we've invested in. The company is My Majors. It just means a student take a 15-minute survey. It can be a high school kid, it can be a student that is already enrolled, it can be a student who start, to help you to pick your major, because we have seen the earlier they take the major or get a good sense where they want to go, they take less unnecessary credits, they interact with our faculty, they interact with advisors, and actually if you go to the website, Universities of Wisconsin, go to my major, you will see actually a very interesting, maybe you can take the survey just yourself and just see, you know, where are you now and where have you been like 20 years or 15 years ago? I don't know the timeline of the different people. I would now, so this is what we do in Strategy 2. I am now going to give it over for Strategy 3 to my colleague, Vice President Julie.
And before Julie starts, though, I just wanted to put one caveat. You know, we've got a green light on a couple of things, but they are at risk of dropping to yellow. One is, I think, Johannes talked about the tuition promise, and if you remember, we've been on and off with the tuition promise. UW administration funded a cohort that started in the fall of 23. There was no tuition promise in the fall of 24. In the fall of 25, working with the universities, we got a grant from Ascendium Education Group, which we are thankful for. We were able to offer a modest tuition promise, substantially below what, for example, our competitor to the west in Minnesota offers. Those participation rates are going to drop off if we don't get a tuition promise funded or some form of enhanced aid to our students. It's just going to happen. And I think that is, when you think about where we've got challenges going forward, that's one. We're also green to date, and rightfully so, on mental health. But the ARPA funds that we got from the Evers administration are going to run out. And if we don't get refunded, we're going to drop back to yellow on these things. So I don't want people to be looking at this and saying, we're smooth sailing. It is not. It is dependent on our getting an additional investment from the state of Wisconsin along the lines that this board approved in order to achieve those things, because things are going to drop off to yellow if that doesn't happen. So sorry for that, Julie. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So for Strategy 3, the strategy states that we will promote excellence in teaching and prioritize the recruitment, development, and retention. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Strategy 3 again says that we will promote excellence in teaching and prioritize the recruitment, development, and retention of high-quality, diverse faculty and staff. For those of you that sat in the Business and Finance Committee earlier today and heard about our fiscal year 24 annual financial statements, if you look down through those numbers, you will see that 65% of our operating resources go towards our faculty and our staff. So basically, our biggest investment is in our faculty and staff. Our biggest asset is our people. So the strategy plays a key role in that. So some of the goals that we have here, first, admittedly, I think, unfortunately, maybe we're starting off with one of our reds, and that is a goal to measure and enhance employee engagement. Not to say that we haven't done anything in this space, but we're definitely not as far along as we would like, and this is one that I think we do need that extra kind of kick to get started and to move along. We anticipate really advancing this work, I think, as our Workday implementation, which you will hear as ATP goes live, or actually after the implementation of ATP, as we look at implementing various business processes, such as standardized exit interviews and the information we can glean from that. So we hope to change the color or the status of that one going forward. I'd like to highlight, though, just a couple other ones, though, in the next couple slides. The first one is increasing overall compensation to be competitive with our peers. We've done a number of things in this category. Jay just talked about what's to come in the biennial budget and the need for that investment. And I think we both see where some of that investment has come in the state, from the state in the past, and where more we are hoping for, as we have requested in our biennial budget. So as we look back, we did secure a 4% pay plan effective in 2023, and then the additional 2% effective in June of 2024. We also tried to do what we could internally, of course. We're not only counting on the state of Wisconsin, even for these pay plans that you see identified here. The universities of Wisconsin do commit 30% of those salary adjustments. We, as part of our tuition increase in this current year, took $1 million of what we generated and intentionally put that towards our minimum salaries to increase those minimum salaries on campuses. So that was a step taken by the universities and an attempt to address this strategy. Again, if you look towards our biennial budget request going forward, we have that increase as well of 5% in fiscal year 26 and 3% in fiscal year 27. We also had included in our biennial budget request pools of funding for merit and market adjustments. So that would be of help in that category as well.
And let me just interject again here. This is a green that could go to yellow pretty quickly. We have made progress in terms of trying to address compensation shortfalls, but the fact of the matter is, at a number of our universities, we are paying our faculty and staff 10 to 20% below the market. And it's not the market in the private sector, it is the market in the academic world, where we have people who can cross the street and make more money. They can cross the Mississippi River and make more money. And long-term, and Julie just mentioned it, 65% of what we invest every single year is in our people. What makes a university? It's the people. And I encourage all of you who, you think about that one professor or staff member that made a difference in your life during your own educational journey. What if they weren't there? And if we are focused on academic excellence, if that's what our focus is, and it better be our focus, we're not going to achieve that if we're not going to pay people fairly. It's as simple as that. And this is a critical one, because if we lose great people, you may not feel it immediately, but you're going to feel it in 10 and 15 years, because you're not going to be able to retain the people that you need to retain in order to do great things. So this is an important one. It's green today because we're making progress, but it has an issue. It could fall off the map very, very quickly, and I think we just need to be very direct and upfront about that.
Okay, so I'll just highlight one more for strategy 3, and that is the yellow dot that you see for identifying priority staffing needs and develop and implement plans to address. UW administration has repurposed a couple existing positions that we already had that were vacant that we thought we could use in a better, more effective way within our universities. And this small team of people now is charged with focusing on compensation and evaluating and quantifying compensation concerns. So Johanna stole a little bit of my thunder. The example that I had here was some of the work that this group has done to look at our mental health providers, as we were hearing that we were underpaying, as we were hearing that we were losing people to the private sector due to higher salaries. Digging in, looking at the data behind it, so we're not just kind of flying from the hip, but really digging into the numbers, seeing where people were falling and what we could do to address that. And that does feed into part of that $22 million budget request to get salaries more competitive with the private market and other higher education institutions as well. So that's a little bit of an example of what we're doing in that area to address Strategy 3 goals. Touching upon some of the tactics then, again, I'll just touch upon a few of them. UW administration has also repurposed existing positions within the Office of Shared Services to hire instructional designers. As we have these people on staff, how do we train them? How do we keep them professionally challenged and provide that professional development to them and allow them to do their jobs as well as they can and use those strengths that we're hiring them to bring to the table. So I recognized one person as a training and development coordinator focusing on employee development. What are the needs? How do we meet those needs formally or informally, and what type of training is needed? Working with the campuses to do that. Obviously, this is one person, not a total one-person show, but working with the campuses to achieve that. We also have working then with those coordinators and the instructional developers, done a number of things to try to advance this area. We have established that priority list of our ongoing training needs at all of our universities. We've developed a number of new courses, such as those related to supervisory responsibilities, Title IX, FERPA, freedom of expression, both for our students and our employees. And we've also partnered with the ATP team as we look to Workday coming online on how do we provide Workday-specific training to assist our employees. And so those are some of the tactics that you see here that we have incorporated into Strategy 3. And with that, I will turn it over to Vice President Patton.
Great, thank you, Vice President Gordon. Strategy 4 really hits on an issue, on a strategy that really is central to our mission and really core to the Wisconsin idea, and that is championing the democratic principles of free expression, academic freedom, and civil discourse. We have two main goals in this area. Our first goal, I'm really proud to say we're on track. This past year, we successfully launched our freedom of expression training module across all 13 universities. And in fact, we're already under development on the core module that we've offered to universities that want to deploy that module. We're actually underway in developing version 2.0. And once that's ready to deploy, we'll have that available later in 2025. Our second goal really centers around making available and supporting a really robust instructional climate that champions open inquiry and critical thinking. And the Wisconsin Institute for Citizenship and Civil Dialogue here at UW administration collaborates with our colleagues over in the Division of Academic and Student Affairs to provide really curricular support relevant to free speech and civil dialogue through professional development and capacity building opportunities for faculty and staff and students in the communities they serve. And we also work to connect and have been working to connect our campuses to various resources related to freedom of expression and civic engagement. And so those are, some of the tactics we've been deploying over this last year. You can see some of the other tactics that we've deployed in this space, two of which I just want to briefly touch on because I think they've been really critical. The first is the campus support, and want to thank the board for your support of the $180,000 in grants. It doesn't necessarily seem a lot when you think about our total budget, but it's really been critical to our universities in supporting their work in the civics and civil dialogue space. You're going to hear more tomorrow from a couple of our universities when we report out on our freedom of expression report. But it's been really crucial in supporting the dialogue on our universities. And then the other work that we're undertaking now, and it'll really launch in complete next year, is our effort to really take our Wisconsin Institute of Policy and Public Service, which is also another team here at the Universities of Wisconsin Admin, and then WICID, that sort of Citizenship and Civil Dialogue Institute. And we're going to bring those two teams together and streamline the work to really sharpen the focus and energize it and rebrand it into the Office of Civic Engagement. again, to sort of help bring attention and, like I say, ensure that we remain a national leader in producing and disseminating knowledge, and enhancing democracy through civil dialogue and public service on a robust marketplace of ideas. So I look forward to sharing more with you about this initiative in the coming months. And now I will turn it back over to Vice President Gordon.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, strategy 5, over halfway there, states that we will ensure our universities are financially and environmentally sustainable. This strategy obviously allows us to fulfill our strategic missions and ensure that we provide the value that we need to our students and to the state of Wisconsin. Fiscal responsibility and sound financial management, I think, really provides that foundational base upon which we provide those educational opportunities and conduct that world-changing research. So this is a crucial piece of it, and I think we've heard a couple times today how foundational this is. I know this was a significant portion of the business and finance agenda today, so I apologize to the committee members from business and finance. You will hear some of the same information again. But I think it reflects a lot of good work going on at our universities and is worthy of hearing a couple times, I think. First, one of our success measures relates to cost savings through shared services and other efficiencies. Our implementation of Workday in the future may play a role in allowing us to expand those shared services, but I can assure you that we're not just sitting still until go live on July 1 of 25. We are ramping up our efforts to enhance these services and hopefully by doing so positioning ourselves to add services in the future and even more so leverage our scale and our size. So shared services right now are located in a number of different offices. We have varying expectations for customer support, for success metrics, and we've begun to bring all UW shared services under one umbrella. And I think this will go a long way in helping enhance those services.
I'm going to address this to President Rothman because this sort of mixes over to the Deloitte report tomorrow. But when I go to the campuses and we talk about shared services, there's one department everybody loves because apparently whatever Kool-Aid they hand out does well. But I do hear from a lot of the campuses concerns about customer service that doesn't match up to what they're so you can address that today or tomorrow. I'm just throwing it out there because I think it's an issue because we'd like shared services. It seems to save us money, but if the customer, which is the campuses, don't feel it, so I'll leave that to you.
No, and we will be actually talking about that this afternoon when we get the Deloitte assessment, and that is the feedback, and I think it's fair that we need to increase our consumer-facing focus of shared services. We also need to be able to show a return on investment, that there is value associated with that for our universities, and have that conversation. And I think Julie, when she presents that, will give you some background that will help you understand how we kind of got where we are. And I just view it as a great opportunity for us to improve because.
Yeah.
No, but that's exactly what we'll be talking about, sharing our initial thoughts. We're already having some conversations with our universities about how we can do that better and how we can provide them what they need and not just what we may offer, because I think that's an important aspect of all of this.
Yeah.
Get whatever Kool-Aid that one department uses and pass it out a lot.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, as I said, I think we have shared services. This is not, we have an office of shared services. This goes well beyond that. We have shared services in a number of different locations within UW administration. And I will acknowledge and admit that we can do better. And so that continuous improvement is part of the culture, and we look forward to having that opportunity. Chris Patton and
I'd only have a problem if you told me you couldn't do better, okay?
No.
You can always do better. And when I ask the question, it's not really, it's just how do we do this better? It's
Right.
not saying you're doing it bad, it's just how can we do it better?
Yep. Thank you for that. And I think that the individuals that oversee these areas are already starting those listening sessions, whether that is Stacy Ralston, Stephen Hopper, Dan Chain, and they've already begun those conversations. Chris and I are going out to campuses as kind of a tour in our new roles and visiting with each institution. And I'm taking time to meet with the campuses as well, individuals who interact directly. So I'm hearing it directly myself and looking to address that going forward. So more to come on that in the next, as you mentioned, Regent Nixon, in the Deloitte presentation. So,
Regent Underly.
Thank you, Regent President. I just had a quick question related to Regent Nixon's, because it's mentioned in here, and it's the Workday implementation, and I understand that that's been ongoing. And I've heard also just concerns from different campus individuals about the implementation. And I'm wondering if maybe at a future meeting we can get a little more in depth, maybe on the transparency of how that's actually working. You know, it's just because it's a huge change campus-wide, and if it's one of the goals that we have that's helping with efficiency, I think as, you know, I think we could use an update on that and just got a full transparency of how it's going.
yeah, that's a great idea. I think in business and finance, in one of our next couple meetings, we also have our large and high-risk IT program. So I think we'll be diving into it there, and happy to bring it to the full board as well. With any project this large, of course, communication is so crucial. And I think one of the things we discussed yesterday with the vice chancellors at all of our campuses is that we have new folks, because this project has been going on for a while, so we have new folks in chairs, so getting them up to speed. For those of us that have been here a while, myself included, I can tell you that I've had people say, well, we approved that. I'm like, we did? What did we decide? Why did we decide that? So there's just so much coming at us in terms of decisions that are being made that we may have forgotten some things. And also, I would say a third category is sometimes you make a decision and it is a good decision based on theory. And then as you get further into it, now we have tenant number 6, I think, built, and we start seeing the ramifications of these decisions. So we are going to start bringing these larger business processes to the campuses, and we've got a couple different meetings identified with that, to do that with our vice chancellors at the campuses, to say, here's some large major business processes that are coming in HR, in finance, in grants. And the purpose of that isn't to redesign or relitigate the decisions we made, but more to make sure we're ready with staffing needs where they may, you know, things may ebb and flow a little bit across lines, and prepare us for those changes. So I think having that discussion with the board would be very well timed. Okay, so I'll just touch upon on this slide here some of the environmental sustainability items that we're doing as well, and a lot of good work underway here. So in the Office of Capital Budget and Planning, with Alex Rowe's leadership, we have updated Region Policy Document 1915, which is physical development principles, and that was updated to incorporate sustainability concepts. I can tell you that there was a lot of good work done across UW campuses, the UW administration, as well as the state Department of Administration. We also, with a couple project employees who have been hired, are doing a lot of good work with registering projects for federally funded tax credits. With those 5 projects that have already been filed, we anticipate $1.2 million in tax credits that likely would arrive this spring. So more hopefully gearing up and coming in that area as campuses look at more sustainability-related projects. For financial sustainability, we've touched upon this first bullet a couple times, and you'll hear more about it again later on today with the Deloitte review, but our primary focus from a financial perspective really has been on those structural deficits, and we have, again, celebrating the good news, done a lot of good work. Campuses have done a lot of good work, made a lot of tough decisions, and I think we're seeing the benefits of them now in these numbers. So for fiscal year 24, 10 universities reported structural deficits. That number was reduced to 6 when the board approved the fiscal year 25 budget this summer. And earlier today, when we updated our financial projections, we noted that 3 of those 6 now anticipate addressing their deficit this year. So they will not carry that over into the next year. And the remaining 3 project eliminating their deficit next year in fiscal year 26. We'll note that that is well ahead of our goal of having structural deficits eliminated by fiscal year 28. So we have a couple slides here on tactics because there were so many that it definitely couldn't even fit on 1 or 2 slides. So I'll just touch upon a few of them. One kind of getting at UW administration and the zero-based budgeting. That's something that's very difficult to do in higher education when you're really talking about people, because basically state government in general works on an incremental basis. You start with what you got last year and you're adding to it. We took an approach for UW administration to do a zero-based budget for our supplies and contracts and things like that that we have. And we started each department with 0, and they had to justify how much they needed for what, line by line, contract by contract of what they might have. You heard about some of those contracts for tax reporting, for our payment card industry compliance. All of those are laid out, and all of that work was really helpful as we go into a later discussion today on what is UW administration, what is our budget, and how do we spend our money. This exercise is allowing us to really review and analyze those costs, determine if that's where we want to prioritize, and make adjustments where needed. We're looking at expanding that going into fiscal year 26. Also, I would highlight on this slide the fact that UW-Madison and UW administration created an intermediate term cash management fund, really allowing us to invest in capital markets. That fund returned 2.3% more than the state investment fund, resulting in nearly $15 million of incremental fiscal year 24 revenue for UW-Madison. UW-Milwaukee did also recently invest money in this fund with $10 million this fall. So we're looking forward to having operating cash. We do an analysis for these institutions to see what is the lowest point they get to, and so we know up to how much each institution could possibly invest. So that seems to be working well for UW-Madison, and we look forward to UW-Milwaukee participating as well. On this slide here, just a few tactics to highlight. Again, a few things that you may have heard about earlier today. One being the Minnesota Tuition Reciprocity Program, the other being our biennial budget request. But as of this year, the UWs were given authority to manage the Minnesota Reciprocity Program, a program that was previously managed by the Higher Educational Aids Board. And without going into a lot of details on exactly what that means, this change allows our universities to retain a greater share of the tuition revenue that we bring in from Minnesota residents. A question was asked earlier today of how much additional revenue. If they're retaining, what does that mean? What's the net to their bottom line? And across all campuses, as I was getting texts from my team members that I was not looking at my phone during the committee meeting, but afterwards I saw I had multiple team members texting me saying it was $18 to $20 million. So a significant amount to assist our UW universities. And lastly then, just touching upon the 25-27 biennial budget request and the advocacy that goes behind that. While many of our universities are operating without a structural deficit, and as I mentioned before, that is great news, our biennial budget request allows our universities to address other needs. It's not just about cutting our cost, obviously. First, our campuses need to invest, and there's a number of areas in our biennial budget request where I think we allow for that investment, such as AI and our financial aid, the tuition promise that President Rothman just mentioned. And second, I would note that our university and our campus operating margins really don't reflect the fact that a large number of our faculty and staff are underpaid compared to their peers, kind of masking what our deficit could really be if we were paying those market rates in some cases. So again, putting our focus on our people, on our biggest asset. I think our biennial budget request with the items I mentioned earlier will help with that and be a good tactic to address strategy number 5. And the last slide here related to strategy 5 are tactics related to academic affairs, and I will pass it over to Johannes.
Thank you, Julian. My apologies that I stole your thunder on the mental health. I now remembered you said that's your example. But I was very excited about that, and I hope we do get the funding. Regents, I'm not going to repeat what Regent Laura Reynolds and Regent Maria Cuso told you last time on academic planning, but I do think it is important to understand the provost's role also in sustainability, financial management of a campus. Although academic program closure is not only just a financial decision, it does play into that equation. It's also about enrollment management, where you see the needs. And I put that up there. How did the campus actually align their program array planning over the last 5 years? The vast majority of the new programs were in the areas of workforce needs, health, STEM, as well as business. And the majority of programs that got eliminated or got suspended on areas non-STEM, non-health. So there's a lot of rationale on the campus, strategic decisions that's happening to help with the sustainability and financial sustainability and the strategic realignment of a campus when you look at program array. And if you look at that, one number that I had to double check, and I think it was President Ronald Reagan who said, I trust you, but I need to verify. And I look at the numbers and I told Tracy Davidson, did we really eliminate or suspend it in the universities of Wisconsin 60 programs? And yes. In the last year, we eliminated and or suspended 60 academic programs. And that's very significant. And if you see that middle bullet, and we will come back to that at the Deloitte report, is we have actually formed a work group under leadership of Provost Betsy Morgan to really look at the criteria we use, the matrix for program elimination and suspension, and also look at the role of the Regents when it comes to that part, not just the approval of programs. But I can report out the provosts do their part in the way that they introduce new programs, but also in the way that they eliminate and suspend programs. So, Regents, on the strategy 6, I just want to highlight that strategy. We will focus on being a global leader in research, scholarship, creative activity, as well as knowledge dissemination that benefits society. And that's actually definition also of a university, right? That is what we do. The goals that we set ourselves, and I'm not going to say President Rothman stole my thunder when he talked about Madison, because I thought that's such a big announcement. I was trust and verify. That was really huge for Madison. But the goals that we set ourselves, we want to increase research expenditures throughout the system, throughout the universities of Wisconsin, including 15% at Milwaukee, 10% at the comprehensives. Results at this point, a green light for me, depending on continuous funding, of course, is that we have increased our, Milwaukee has increased research expenditures by 3.5% and at the comprehensive 3.6%. I'm not going to mention again Madison. I just think it's remarkable. It's truly, we're very blessed to have Madison with us here, UW-Madison, with that kind of number, 1.7 billion. That's truly remarkable. And I know both the Chancellor and the Provost are unfortunately not here today, but I also just want to congratulate them. And then also I'm looking at Chancellor Mark Money and say we hope we retain the second R1 in the universities of Wisconsin. The Carnegie classification system has changed the criteria for R1. And if I look at this, I hope it's still a green light that Milwaukee will retain their R1 status. You see the number of research doctorates, that's part of the criteria they use. And it looks to me that they're still on track. And it looks to me 59 million reached the threshold of, is it 54 million that you need? So I hope it's going to be a green light that Milwaukee will retain its R1 status. I'm not going to go through the tactics there. All I'm going to say is that's what the campuses are doing. We really just try to facilitate and coordinate. On strategy 7, it says we will foster a culture of innovation, and I think that was a critical word, innovation in support of advancing human knowledge and economic prosperity. And I did confirm again with President Rothman, that is something that the Chancellor really did feel strong about in the final development of the plan. We need an innovation fund, really to help facilitate innovative and creative thinking on a campus with one another, actually with partners, be it in industry, be it in the community, etc. I'm very happy to report out actually that the goal is to allocate $1 million per year over a period of 5 years. We've done that last year, 3 winners, and actually we have received, I think, 22 requests this year, proposals. And we will make the final, President Rothman will sign off early in January. So that is a pretty good green light, and we're looking, actually, the funding works like you get the funding for 3 years, for 2 years, and if you really are really successful, you might get it, actually, the top one of the first 3 will get a 3rd year of funding. So this is exciting, and I think that's playing out very well. Strategy 8, which ties actually in, if you look at the strategic plan, very close to Strategy 1 and Strategy 2, because it deals with enrollment management and student success, where it says we will support or provide support for universities to drive enrollment to meet the needs of the state and the knowledge economy, workforce development, and actually our own relevancy. The goals there, if you look at the goals, and that one, the first one there is yellow, and there's a reason, because we want to push to see if it's possible to graduate 41,000 students by 2028. And President Rothman said, let's go for it. The problem is, at this point, or the challenge is, we're a little bit behind our target. And if you recall President Rothman, and I don't want to speak on his behalf, but if we don't get the funding, if you are funded at number 43, and if I can say this, it's very difficult to reach the 41,000. So I do think that's another area where you see you do need the funding, because if you look at the strategic plan and what we invest to ensure student success, to retain students, to recruit students, to graduate students, it costs money. And that's the reason why we have this ask, because we're so underfunded to reach that specific goal. The second goal there is one that always bothered me, even when I was the provost on the campus in Milwaukee, when I saw every year the decline in the number of students that participate that end up, and I could not understand why it went down from 33, 32, 30, 26. I have a green dot there because I'm optimistic. We moved the needle back. And to move that needle back was significant. And I think the main reason why we were able to move that needle back for me was the tuition promise. And if direct admits is going to work, and if dual enrollment is going to work, we're going to bring it back. So I stay optimistic and agree. Of course, depending on the budget, but I think those three strategies I really think is good, because that's one of the areas where we should not lose students. And it's still challenging to see how we did go from 33% to 26% now, bringing it back. So that's for me a good indicator. And with what we do, I think we're going to be successful. Transfer students, we've actually moved the needle there too, and I will talk a little bit about that at transfers and what we're doing there. We want to improve the graduation rates by 5 percentage points. We're on track, improved overall, and we have also mentioned there that we have narrowed that gap that I mentioned in Strategy 1 of underrepresented minority and low-income students, narrowing that gap. And then one area that's still yellow or orange, I think we can change that too, is to recruit back students who actually needed 24 credits to graduate. So we are actively looking with targeted efforts to bring back students, right? And look at what are the best. And I know campuses do that, our universities, but how can we actually provide support and coordination? Because that's also a low-hanging fruit. The online space, that space, and then a participation space. Regent Jill?
Yeah, thank you so much. I was just curious on that last point. How are you targeting, or how are you prioritizing? Like, I don't think we have like a system-wide student information system, but I'm just curious, are you prioritizing, like you said, those who have 24 credits left to go? Are you prioritizing, I don't know, I just was curious.
That's actually a good question, and I don't know if any of the provosts who actually implement returning students and what they do, there are vendors out there that have very specific targets that they work on, where it's 24 credits. They have the names, they reach out to them, they continue to reach out. And it's also depending on the debt they have. So I don't know if any of the provost or...
John has one.
John?
Yeah, so all of the above. So we, different work with different target populations, right, and different people doing that work. So a student who's just been out for a semester, still quote unquote an active student, just not enrolled. That's a group of people, those closest to them, so their advisors, et cetera. And then we start to kind of spread them out over the years. The farther they get from being recent students, the more we have to look more closely to see why they might not be back, where they academically dismissed as potentially. So that's a different person that would engage in that dialogue about what's forgivable or not. Is there still a financial debt? Or is it some other reason? So we have various folks kind of work on that whole process. And then we'll also explore opportunities to engage with vendors that work in this space and have more proactive work and wrap other services around students who've stopped out before, because there's a reason they stopped out before, and so the level of services they might need could be different than we would have with a student who's been a continuous student.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other provost who wants to add something? Thank you. I think that captures it. It is a low-hanging fruit for us, and that's something that we really can make a difference. Julie, you look at me if you want to say nothing. You just say there where you are. And then, Regents, on the strategies, I just want to highlight two there, because I've talked through a number of the others, because some of the strategies link up to some of the other tactics. Our tactics link up with some of the other strategies we do. I just want to mention again how hard we work on dual enrollments. Regent Carl Weatherly and Regent Jill Annerly 2 years ago, Green Bay, I don't know if you remember that, and said, what are we doing in that space other than with direct admit? We got the charge from the president. We had a task force. We reported that out. It was accepted by the president. It was signed off. We did form an implementation committee, which is now, Tracy, a standing committee, right? I always get confused, but it's a standing committee. We already formed a community of best practices of people among the campuses. We work very closely with DPI. Again, Regent Jill, thank you for that. For the time that people from DPI is actually on our committees, working with us, working with the campuses. What we truly want to do, if you're really successful in dual enrollments, I can just tell you that, or mention, maybe you do know that in trend documents, if you read about trends of higher education, moving into the K-12 system space is a key trend that we will see in a strategy of campuses, and dual enrollments come up every time, right? That's a key one. What we want to do, if we're really successful, is to expand access, to really increase participation rates, right? That number 26, 27, and to ensure that students who actually make use of dual enrollments on our campuses actually end up at the university. That number is very low. And that is one of the strategies we really do on the dual enrollment. And then the other one I just want to mention is transfer. I just thought when I read this, I said, yeah, I really want to make this 2025 just, for me personally, a year of transfer. We've seen the numbers increase, but I do think that's another space where we can be more smooth as we do our transfers. And actually in February, under leadership of Julia Amon, we are going to have a large gathering of our campuses on transfer, and really look at, what are the national trends, what are the best practices, what are the transfer tools we have, right? We have SIS. I now learn more about SIS 135 and SIS 140. I'm not really into policies and procedures, but it is important to know what we do with our transfers and what needs to change there. We want to identify really better understanding of our transfer students, what are the barriers that we face, and then hopefully we can have another task force to really look at how can we change specifically among our campuses, our transfers. And then actually the provost.
Regent Walsh.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to ask about the item second to the last, targeted efforts to recruit back students who opted out. What's happening in that area?
That is exactly what we talked about, that's happening on the campuses. And Julie, I am now going to ask you just to speak a little bit of what we are looking at in terms of bringing back the students that opt out. And at
right,
point,
I'm curious what's working, if anything is working.
Yeah.
So I'll just give a high-level overview. This is certainly an area of interest in many, many places, as you heard. A lot of things are happening on individual campuses. Some campuses are partnering with vendors to pursue their efforts. Some are kind of doing their own homegrown kind of strategy. Just yesterday, meeting with the SSEOs and AOs, we talked about coming together around this. We also talked about the fact that we want to kind of lay a groundwork to make this even more successful. There's some things we need to do to kind of get our own house in order to make any kind of organized system-wide strategy more effective. And so those are some of the conversations that are coming probably in the next year, but it also is connected to the Johannes's year of transfer too, because bringing students back often has transfer implications. And so the work that we're going to be doing in transfer also relates to the work in bringing back students and getting them back into the fold and getting them graduated wherever we can across the system.
Right, and I'm concerned that, to me, this seems like a high-touch operation to get people back into completed degrees. So it looks like, at least right now, the resources are going a little more in other directions, but I hope we're not forgetting about those folks who came to us for a time and then left.
No, as I mentioned, Regent Karen, that is actually, for me, is a low-hanging fruit. The online space, that's actually one of the strategies, is to really bring back students in the online space. And then as Provost John mentioned, if they do have debt or whatever, is there a way that you can say, listen, if you can come back, you can complete it. We might, there are many tactics around bringing back students, but it's not just students who come back to campus. We look at that as a tactic also in the online space. Yeah.
And just to give a finer point on that, in terms of the magnitude of that population, there are 700,000 plus people in the state of Wisconsin who have some college credit but didn't complete their degree. Now, if they have 15 credits, and that's not a likely someone to look at. But if you have someone who is a semester or a semester, a year away from graduating, and it could help them achieve, take the next step in their careers. Let's say it's 10% of that number. That's 70,000 people that we could be helping, and again, helping Wisconsin win the war for talent, creating that social mobility for people, and they've already been here. But there are a lot of pieces. Part of it's financial, part of it's if they've got debt, part of it is the credit transfer, which is a challenge. Right. Even within the system, sometimes within the universities of Wisconsin, it can be a challenge, and that's what Johannes is going to be working on with our universities to see, can we streamline that in a way that's more effective than we're doing today.
Right. Thank you.
And then Regents, the last one there on trans.
Sorry, Regent Adams, did you?
If you're going to make a point on strategy 8, go right ahead, because my question is more.
Oh, okay.
Go right.
Yeah, mine is just a short comment to say that actually, as far as I know, for the first time, all the provosts from the technical colleges, us, as well as the private universities, are going to meet in February together, just to meet one another and see what we do and how we collaborate, what works, what doesn't work. But one of the topics we're going to discuss is transfer, right? And what are best practices? We have more than about 1,800 different transfer agreements between universities, but that's just another momentum that we are building collectively in the state to really look at them, to maximize the effort of transfer between all our higher education institutions. Richard Adams, that's what I wanted to say on this last tactic of strategy 8.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I did want to ask a question that's coming up for me based on the first 8 that you've collectively have shared. When I think, and you talked about getting together to collaborate around best practices in general, this may add to that discussion. But if we're talking about driving enrollment to grow the talent pipeline, there are 3 of the strategies so far, strategy 1, strategy 3, and 8, that have some linkage that I have more of a comment than a question, and I'm just wondering if we're thinking about it in this way. When you think about the demographic trends to grow the talent pipeline and where our opportunity is for enrollment, I can't help but come back to strategy 1 when we talk about closing the gap for underrepresented students. And in strategy 8, we get pretty smart about our goal to grow the talent pipeline by graduating 41,000 annually. When we look at strategy 1, it's a bit broad to just close the participation gap. And so I'm wondering if we look at the demographic trends to close that gap, getting back to those students of color, what might be the breakdown in that broad students of color? How do we break that down by community, by population, by ethnicity, and then look at what the opportunity is in the marketplace so we can get a bit more targeted on driving enrollment from that population group? So that was the first thought that was coming up for me, and maybe someone is looking at this, maybe not, but I just wanted to lift that up. The other piece is when we talk about strategy 3, and that's related to faculty. Let me make sure I got this right. Yes, improving retention progress to tenure and time at institution for individuals from underrepresented groups. I started thinking about what is the detailed breakdown on that as well, because when you look at those underrepresented groups, largely going to be students of color, and other aspects across the diversity spectrum, that's going to directly impact our ability to recruit students of color. And so that was my observation, and just sharing how are we looking at those interrelatedly as we think about next steps in refining the strategic plan and looking at these 3 strategies in particular. Thank you.
And Regent Adams, maybe I can share a couple things that I think perhaps we haven't done the plan itself justice in terms of the summary that we're sharing today, because the success measures in Strategy 1 are pretty specific about closing the gap in participation of underrepresented students by 50%, and then we have specific percentage improvements that we want to show for a variety of different groups. There's a specific number for Pell Grant students. There is a specific target for first-gen students. And then we said we are trying to close the retention gap, or the retention and graduation gap by 12 percentage points. So we didn't do Strategy 1 full justice in the interest of time, but there are specific targets in Strategy 1, because you're right. If you step back and you start thinking about that, and that's when I, in my overview, tried to share a little bit of that. As I thought about this more, we've got strategies that are kind of bouncing in different places. If we really look at it as it relates to hitting that 41,000, what does that mean? It means enrollment, and it means that we have to reach a broader class of student than we have historically, whether they be traditional high school students or they be adult learners. I mean, that's number one. Retention then goes to, we want to be able to retain as many of those students as we possibly can. It's good for us, but quite frankly, it's much better for the individual, right? We don't want somebody to come and not be successful in our university. And then we want to graduate them on a timely basis, understanding that people are more likely to opt in and opt out given their family situation. So, the 4- and 6-year graduation rates are a couple of data points, but we have to be sensitive to the facts. So that's the piece. As it relates to the faculty and staff, we did not put numbers on those, in part because that creates issues from a hiring perspective, and I certainly will have General Counsel Williams weigh in on that. But I think that's where the concern is. But I think we appreciate the fact, and I've seen it in my prior life, and I know talking to our chancellors and provosts and faculty members here, that if a student sees someone who looks like them at the head of the class, it makes a difference. That goes back to the retention. So there's a lot of intertwined within this plan that you've properly noted, but we don't have specifics on the faculty and staff, but we certainly do on the student numbers themselves.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. And that also goes to the marketing and the outreach in terms of what that opportunity is, and then being very specific about reaching various communities in the way that they will receive and respond. So, but thank you for that. And
well, and I think it goes, Regent Adams, to the fact that when we're 43rd out of 50, where have cuts been
it all
made?
comes back to,
And it comes back to that, because we could, from a continuous improvement perspective, be in the class, if we were in high schools and middle schools and elementary schools more, that's going to make a difference. I read something recently, I won't have the numbers correct, but they asked second graders, what job would you aspire to do when you grow up? And 80 or 85% of those students said they picked a profession that would require them, or a career that would require them to have at least a 4-year degree. And sometime between that second year point and when they're in high school, our participation rates drop off. And there's all different factors for that. Some of it's performance, but part of it's economic, and can you afford to go to school? And those are the things that we're trying to focus on, because I think, the great thing about the affordability study that Ben and his team have done now for the second time since I've been in my tenure is that we're the most affordable public university system in the Midwest and beyond, I believe. But that doesn't tell the whole story, because there's numbers in that survey that aren't particularly helpful. We are educating fewer students of lower socioeconomic means as a percentage of our total student base today than we were 10 years ago. So we are not capturing that broader population. If we do not capture that broader population, we don't get to 41,000.
That's
It's as
right.
simple as that.
That's right.
Thank you for a very good answer, President Rothman. I am now giving this over to Chris for the next on Strategy 9, right?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to kick it off and probably hand it right back to you, Vice President Ritz. But Strategy 9 really highlights our work around really engaging and connecting the dots between our UW's employers, entrepreneurs, workers, students, and faculty. And we have a series of goals that I know the Vice President, Senior Vice President, is going to highlight to begin our work in this area.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, Regents, I just want to mention, and a while, also 2 years ago, I think, in August in Green Bay, when Chancellor Mike talked about Green Bay serving 90,000 students, and I thought, whoops, is it 90,000? But what he meant was also outreach, not just full-time enrolled students. We reach close to 1 million people in the state through continuing education, short courses, micro-credentialing. It's not just 164,000 students that are enrolled at our campuses. And I think that's a very powerful message. So part of our strategic plan and the goals that we have for our strategic plan is we want to engage 500,000 plus residents per year in our workforce, career education, professional development, community engagement, and other high-demand programs. Now, when we developed that program, I don't think, well, I at least didn't realize how much we already do in that space. That Madison alone with the extension, division of extension, reached 500,000 plus. And then if you look at that 320,000 non-credit students that are enrolled through our campuses, continuing education, and I also want to give a shout out here to Regent John Prince, who said, I want to hear from them. So last time at the education committee, there was a presentation that I think one of the first times the continuing education people came to tell us what they do. And that 320,000 was an increase of 19% to the previous year. It was like 280,000. So that is a significant place where we actually start to make a big difference in our state in terms of reaching out, workforce development, career development, high demand areas. The others I'm not necessarily going through with you, but I thought it's so good just to share with you the success we have in the space of continuing education, micro-credential, as well as shorter courses that we offer. That starts off as non-credit, but depending on how a campus does that, it can actually be for credit, right? The prior credit learning assessment that you do and see, okay, this can actually transfer, and it can actually add to a degree, either a master's degree or a bachelor degree. I am going to give it back to Chris if you want to just talk through the other tactics that we actually employ.
Yeah, I just want to highlight, we're obviously doing a ton of work in this space. The two that I think we just want to highlight is, the work that we're doing really is exciting in the area of student work experiences. We, for example, are really plussing up the digital marketing clinic that really launched first at UW Oshkosh in the Small Business Development Center to provide digital marketing work and expertise to small businesses, and bringing that now statewide throughout all of our small business development centers to provide expertise to entrepreneurs and small businesses. Our Office of Business and Entrepreneurship this year also is engaging entrepreneurs and small businesses in every corner of the state, and has assisted over 5,600 entrepreneurs and small businesses in providing continuous improvement and training, and has led to the creation of almost 250 new small businesses. So really exciting work is going on in just those two tactics alone. So really, really exciting connections. So I know we want to just turn it over and turn it over to Associate Vice President Jablonski as well to talk a little bit about some of our branding work.
Thanks, Chris. I think I'll let this a little bit of a transition in slides here. But yeah, we were tasked through S8.2 to leverage the UW brand through an umbrella marketing campaign to drive enrollments, and that's what we're doing now. I'll let the slides catch up to me. So we're doing that now. So it was just over a year ago that we announced the Universities of Wisconsin rebrand. Why did we do this? Field research undertaken 2 years ago revealed that Wisconsinites did not have a clear understanding of their public universities or how they were connected. And there was rampant brand confusion and widespread misperception that UW system means UW-Madison and Madison only. Our name and brand changes were intended to address the confusion and put all 13 of our universities front and center in the public's mind. As importantly, removing system from our name puts the focus on our universities rather than the administrative infrastructure and bureaucracy. By the way, we are not alone amongst organizations that see the benefits of not using system and institutions in how we identify ourselves. These words often have negative connotations and should be avoided. While some outliers remain, most media outlets now use our rebranded name, and they should. To address public perception issues, we must start with a clear collective identity. Our research has also showed that Wisconsinites take great pride in their state and their public universities, and they see the universities of Wisconsin as providing great opportunities for the people of Wisconsin. Our updated branding, founded on the themes of pride and opportunity, now reflects that. The new logo and mark that you'll see up there feature the outline of the state of Wisconsin, immediately calling attention to who we are. The constellation map reinforces the message that we are all a group of distinct universities throughout the state that are also connected to each other. You'll also see how our UW's brand of pride and opportunity throughout all of our communications and work product for both internal and external audiences. On our websites, our reports, our presentations, our news releases, our public engagements, our business cards, everywhere you'll see our name. Using this shared brand, we've now created consistency across the organization. The new brand aligns with the many programs and initiatives within the organization as well. You'll see a couple of examples up there that are fundamentally different from what they looked like a year ago. In the past, many offices within UWSA were not aligned under one brand. We have changed that. Our universities' websites. 1 year into this rebranding initiative, all 13 universities have now co-branded with Universities of Wisconsin on their individual websites. Just a sidebar, our universities have been great to work with in this, which has been a significant change. For context, about a year ago, when we started this process, only 5 of the 13 universities even mentioned they were part of system. Now you'll increasingly see the Universities of Wisconsin brand, whether it's the mark, the constellation map, or a description of how their university fits into the overall Universities of Wisconsin, included in how these universities describe themselves. Taking a closer look, here's how 2 universities are moving forward with co-branding efforts that we have begun to incentivize. UW Stout's co-branded animated end bumper video is now the standard closing for all UW Stout produced videos. And UW Whitewater's participation in the National Kindness eWall project brings a frequently fresh digital message to more than 300 schools and students throughout Wisconsin and Illinois. Three 30-second video commercials have been produced targeting potential students and their families to help amplify awareness of the UW's brand. All 3 commercials aired prominently on broadcast television in recent months, such as Packer games and the Olympics. There are several key elements in the videos and other products that I'd like to draw your attention to before we watch one. The constellation you'll see, it shows the connection between a student's ideas, talents, and passions within our universities. And the animated version of the constellation that closes each video then echoes the concept to show the connection of our universities to the state.
It's always been there, his love of the outdoors. Some days, you wonder if it might be his calling. Truth is, you know that the things he's passionate about today will build the foundation of what he does tomorrow and possibly inspire a new journey. All he needs now is a way to make it happen. We are the universities of Wisconsin. 13 universities, unlimited opportunity.
So you'll see these that they're simple in the fact that they try to make an emotional connection with parents and the pride and the excitement they feel about the many opportunities ahead for their kids, and maybe spur them to consider the UWs as a way to make that happen. We've also complemented the ad campaign with digital banners, a series of digital banners that were produced, both static and animated, that connect to the larger ad campaign. These have been widely posted on social media platforms, again highlighting the defining theme of 13 universities, unlimited opportunity, and they point directly to our website. As a matter of fact, they've drawn 416,000 additional trackable clicks into wisconsin.edu in the 6-month period. We can go to the next slide. Additionally, a vital part of the UW's rebrand has been the redesign and update of the Universities of Wisconsin homepage with the goal of being more student-focused, core value, and user-friendly. Wisconsin.edu is an extraordinarily powerful domain, and we wanted to make the most of it. The website now features more direct access to our universities, programs, and enrollment opportunities, and it buries traditional aspects such as organizational structure of the UW administration. A major focus of the website, in alignment with the strategic plan, is to help aid enrollment efforts at our universities. Surveys were conducted prior to the launch of the campaign and then again in late October. I just want to highlight a couple of the results. The message is being seen, and there is an increased understanding of who the universities of Wisconsin are. 64% of participants in the second survey recalled seeing the campaign ads. Awareness of who we are had increased by 50% from the campaign start. And in my view, the most important change has been the shift in consideration of parents, where we saw a 12% move toward our universities in terms of higher education options. Message is also driving action, with increased traffic to our website, click-through rates for digital displays at about 5 times the industry average. Looking ahead to 2025, we will continue to emphasize on building brand recognition for all 13 of our universities and the opportunities they offer. And to bolster our public perception, we will continue efforts to help people understand what the universities of Wisconsin mean to the state and the people of Wisconsin. This includes the value of the UW's education, research, and service. So while our first year was spent on building awareness, our second year will focus more on the overall value that we provide to all Wisconsinites. And enrollment. In the coming months, we will continue, and this is very important, working with Julie Amon's group, who's been fantastic, I owe her that, to improve the look, feel, and user experience within wisconsin.edu to best capture the traffic we are generating to the new wisconsin.edu website. In closing, with continued investment in our branding and co-branding, we expect to see even more progress in the space and further efforts to meet the goals of the strategic plan. Thanks.
And with that, that concludes our prepared comments in terms of our update on the strategic plan. Again, I just want to thank my team as well as our great universities. I feel that we are rowing in the same direction. We have our mission to serve the state of Wisconsin, and we are doing our best to fulfill that mission.
Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you very much for that presentation and all your extremely hard work. It's incredible. Everybody is really doing an amount of incredible dedication and support for the strategic plan. And we only have a few minutes left, and we're going to take a break in a little bit, but feel free to stretch and stand up. I just want to ask a few questions, and I am going to start us off. The presentation shows all the deliberate thought and independent review, which has been over a year in the making, and the results of the strategic plan it's exciting, and I'm cautiously optimistic. The focus and resolve, for example, the structural deficits is really impressive. But what I'm really concerned about as we go forward, are we going to be able to hit all our targets if we don't get any increase in state support? What's going to happen?
Yeah, and then I'll just share some initial thoughts. I start with using the old business adage, you don't cut your way to success. And our universities have done enormously hard work to eliminate those structural deficits, President, as you have noted. But that means that we're simply balancing the books and we are not investing in the things that we need to. And if we are going to maintain affordability and accessibility, we're not going to get that without further state investment. I have been clear, at least in terms of what I would recommend to this board, if we got the budget request that this board approved, and if it was funded, that I would not recommend a tuition increase for the 2 years of the biennium. And we would maintain the branch campuses that have not been slated for closing. We would invest in them and make those remain open. If we don't get those dollars, we're going to have to, our primary source is tuition. That's just the reality. And we have to be able to invest in things. If you think about, how do we drive enrollment and retention and graduation rates to hit that 41,000 graduate target level, and that's not for us, that is for the state of Wisconsin. Because if our great employers in this state are creating jobs that we will not be able to fill. They need our graduates. And if those jobs aren't filled in this state, those jobs are going to go elsewhere. And that's the risk to the state's economy that is there. But we have to be able to invest in things like a tuition promise, to be able to provide students the opportunity and give them a path forward to graduation so they can seriously consider that a university education is important. If we're not working on retention initiatives, that's academic advising, that's career counseling, that's mental health services to provide those students, our retention rates aren't going to be where they need to be. If we don't have the money to invest to reach out to those adult learners, we're not going to capture those people. If we don't pay our people fairly at market, our ability to maintain excellence in our universities is going to suffer. It's as simple as that. And we can't, quite frankly, we can't raise tuition enough to deal with that. And again, once we start raising tuition, we're going to become less affordable to more and more people. And that's not what the universities of Wisconsin want to do. So the short answer to your question is, without additional investment, are we going to be able to hit all the targets? The answer is no.
Amy, can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yes, you can, Regent Ryan.
And actually, maybe Julie, I should know this, and I'm embarrassed I don't, but could you remind me the aggregate increase in revenue that the last tuition increase generated? I know we had pay plan and a variety of things that I got spent on, but the last tuition increase, how much more revenue did that generate?
Yeah, Julie, and maybe you can provide that, but you can give it maybe on a percentage basis increase, how much additional revenue that generates.
Yeah, I don't have that number handy off the top of my head. I know we were at about a 4.5% overall cost of attendance increase, but I don't have the revenue generation piece of it.
The reason I'm asking is just to understand how much of a tuition increase we would need to do to get that $885 million if that didn't happen. So trying to understand that back and forth.
As a practical matter, we couldn't even come close to it.
That
was my point.
Yeah, I think it's, and I'm going to, this is where I get dangerous trying to remember numbers, but I think a percent increase is it 10 to 12 to 14 million? It is not a number that moves the needle as significantly as you might think. And the fact of the matter is, we would make ourselves so unaffordable to the citizens of the state. It would not be workable. So then what we are left with then is if there is no additional funding, what we are left with is trying to figure out how we get by as best we can, but then it's dependent on cuts. I mean, it's dependent on some increase in tuition, but then it's depending on where can we cut further. And at some point you're cutting into muscle and you're cutting into bone, and I think we're rapidly approaching that. And at the same time, if we're not paying our people fairly, and Julie mentioned and I mentioned it, our structural deficits, if we were to pay people, at the market level, would be substantial. I mean, they'd be substantial.
Yeah, and I guess that's the point I was trying to make today, is that, yes, to Amy's question, if the money wasn't there and it was mentioned tuition increases, but there's no way we could do that. And cutting muscle and bone in my profession is called an amputation.
Yep.
Regent Goydam, Regent Walsh, and Regent Nixon, you had a question? Regent Goydam.
Thank you, Regent President Bogos. First of all, I also want to commend, this is an incredible amount of work, a lot of plans behind this that I'm sure have been, are being executed. I think maybe a couple comments, there's a fair amount of green on these, that there was voiceover that, you know, if not funding, then we go yellow, maybe even worse. And so I think it's important for all of us to take away that maybe the green is, it goes to the effort that's been put forward, which has been significant, but on the results piece, I think it's really contingent on the dollars, as we've discussed. So I think that's an important takeaway for me. The other is, you know, we as board members are very motivated to support the efforts here, and I think there are a couple pieces that feel like this is a plan that is to stabilize and to sustain where we are today versus a vision for the future, because it's very hard to think 2040, 2050 when you've got to sort of put the basic food on the table, if you will. And so as we're trying to reconcile those competing critical things, because we've got to think long-term, but also deal with the immediate future, how can we support as Regents this ambitious program, both tactically, what's happening, and then also looking further down the field?
And I think just a couple of thoughts, Regent Goydam. One is, how can the Regents be supportive? I think through questioning and challenging us and saying, are you achieving this? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? There is tremendous value for our team of having to present to you, because it requires us to rethink and how are we going to present this and how we're going to make it. So I don't want to undervalue that. Certainly your advocacy efforts on our behalf would be very welcome. And I think that's another way the Regents can support. But I think asking the questions and saying, well, did you think of this? Did you think of that? You know, helps us in ways that you might not at first blush appreciate, but it does make a big difference, because it causes us every once in a while to get a question and say, boy, I haven't thought about it that way. How do I do it? How do I do it better? So I think it's the continued oversight on our execution of the plan and where our targets are, and challenging us where you think we're off and where that plan should evolve. As you talk about the longer term, under Johannes's leadership, and he's working with the chancellors now and the provosts in our shared governance groups, we have asked the question, what is the future of Wisconsin, or what is the future of higher education, particularly as it relates to the state, look like? Because I would agree with you. I think the plan that is currently in place has more tactical elements to it than it does strategic. I think that was a result of that's where we were in December of 2022, and we had to start somewhere. And I'm a big believer in as long as you execute a plan, even if it's not a perfect plan, you're better. It's the execution that is more critical than the plan itself. I think going forward, we need to be thinking more strategic in terms of the next piece. I'm concerned that we don't get distracted by the shiny object over here about what do we need to look like in 10 and 15 years. Right now, we got to look at what are we going to look like in 2028, and what do we need to do to stabilize. You know, that group is talking about issues about, you know, what are the changing demographics going to mean to us? I mean, we can't ignore that the birth rates in the state continue to decline. But that's an area that we can be having conversation with the legislature, because if you look at the organic population growth in Wisconsin, it is not going to satisfy the needs of the state. So how do we change that? And how can the universities of Wisconsin play a role in that? They're talking about what about, you know, how does our business model need to change? Do we look at a hybrid structure? Do we look at potential subscriptions? Is it more continuing education? You know, and is it stackable credentials? Is that what the university is going to look like going forward? How is technology going to disrupt us? In a way, you know, certainly when this plan was developed in December of 2022, artificial intelligence was there. The generative capacity of artificial intelligence wasn't. And that changed, you know, a little over a year ago. How is that going to change, you know, what we should be doing? You know, I look at that in three different buckets. You know, one bucket is we've got great research institutions. How are they going to advance artificial intelligence? The second piece, how are we going to use it in the teaching of our students? But what are we going to teach them? That, you know, in my mind, that artificial intelligence has to be imbued within curriculum across the line. It's going to make a difference. If you're a psychology major, it's not just if you're a computer science major. And I think, the universities play a role in that. And then the other bucket is, what are the safeguards going to be? What are the guardrails going to be? And aren't we in a good position as the universities of Wisconsin to help society define those? About saying, okay, this has the potential of being really good. It has the potential of causing some real harm. So how do we help define the guardrails? I think, that's an aspect of what we need to do. We need to be talking about, this group is looking at, and basically all of these are trends to try to define strategies kind of going forward. Because one of the things that Johannes reminds me of is that you'll never predict the future accurately. But we can look at trends and how do we have to be evolving toward those trends. Another is, what is the workforce of the future going to look like? What skill sets are they going to need, are graduates going to need to be successful in a period of time that there could be change that is unimaginable sitting here today? But what do those people, what skill sets, what attributes do those students need to have? So we are working on that. We will come back to you. We're still in the process, and Johannes, I'll allow you to speak a little bit more about it. But that to me, that's really exciting. But again, shiny thing, I don't want to lose sight of, we got to get done what we got to get done by 2028, but we're starting to build the platform for what the next step will be, and that's got to be more strategic. So.
And I can just say a little bit about the future of higher education. It's, for me personally, a very intriguing topic. Where are we going? Because I look back at the last 20 years and there was not a lot that I predicted correctly. And I thought, but a lot of stuff did happen and impacted us. If you just look at libraries in 2000 and where they are now. But the budget more or less stayed the same. But space changed, subscriptions, no more. I mean, that's one example that I thought. So what we did was, based on the request from President Rothman, is really work with the chancellors, and then I did work with the faculty and the provost to really look at what's our future, what are the main trends. And we have identified a number, like 10, 15 different documents that just came out, Chronicle of Higher Education, etc., that all had very good assessments of how they predict the future. How's it going to look to 2035? We shared those with the groups and said, start thinking about that. And so the chancellors had a breakaway group. We had a breakaway group with the provost, with the faculty. Faculty was talking about the future of higher ed from the classroom. Right? You talk about this level, but what's happening in the classroom? And so we have identified 7 different trends at this point, based on guiding principles like trust, transparency, innovation, the ability to change, right? What are the basic guiding principles that guides us in the future? The 7 trends, one of them is demographics and enrollments. The second one was public education, the perception about higher ed from the public. The third trend that we need to look at is a new budget model. We thought MOOCs was going to change us radically. Well, MOOCs had a good proposal, but it wasn't accepted by higher ed because it offered kind of free education, but higher education didn't embrace that because that would have been a radical new business model if MOOCs actually did take off, but it never really took off, right? And then the other trend that we look at is the impact of AI and other disruptive technologies. How is work going to look like on a campus? How is work going to change on a campus? What are new jobs that's going to be created on the campus, but also the workforce, right? It's not just data scientists, as President Rothman mentioned. And then I think some of the other trends that we are looking at is just student preparedness. How is that going to look like? And then the question that we will ask, we're kind of thinking of having trained teams. Like we want to really get knowledgeable people who really understand on the campuses a new business model, or how AI is going to be disruptive for us in the future, and get people knowledgeable from our campuses to talk through that. And then the questions they ask is, what's happening currently? Kind of a storytelling about it. How does it look now? Right? If you ask a person on a campus, what's an AI hub? You probably will get 40 different answers, right? We're still trying to engage, what does it mean? Second question is, how is this playing out currently at the campus? How do we think is this going to look 1 to 3 years from now? I predict it will look probably different. Just think of plagiarism as a notion and how this is going to be challenging, right? I like to use ChatGPT to do my editing because I can't write very well in English, so I love just going in there. But privacy issues, where does it go? So I think that's going to change. How is it going to look 5 years from now and 10 years? And really kind of build, and then the question is, as President Rothman said, tell me what are we then going to do? So these knowledgeable people would think together and say, okay, well, this is the trend, this is what we think is going to happen. What do we need to do to be prepared? So we really want to get input from 7 different groups, trend teams, and really build it in. It's also important, I think, for the trained teams to really talk to one another. Because if you talk about a new business model, but you don't hear what student preparedness means, or if you don't understand AI, you cannot talk in isolation about the future if you don't think in an integrated way. So that's kind of the thinking behind this. And I think the question that came also up yesterday at the Chancellor's was, well, part of the starting point on this discussion is use AI to really generate some thoughts for us that we can have as a starting point, right? So it's kind of for me personally, an exciting endeavor, but it's also kind of scary and exciting to see, are we correct, and how do we prepare when we look at our future? So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we talk about the future of higher ed.
Thank you. Regent Walsh, then Regent Nixon, and I think we're going to have to stop after that.
I had a quick question for Jack about the marketing plan. I'm very impressed by your results, but there was one item I'm not clear on exactly what you meant, and that's the 12% of parents. So are they more receptive to their son or daughter attending a UW school? Does it mean that, you can see it's kind of fuzzy from over here.
Yep, no, I know I threw a lot of statistics at you. What it is we asked parents basically their consideration set for universities.
Okay.
And we gave them
consideration as to whether they would advise their child to.
Yep.
Okay.
So everything, technical colleges, private universities, basically the gamut. And what we found is that there was a shift from toward our universities and away from other non-UW organizations.
So away from private colleges and away from the technical colleges.
Correct.
Well, I'll talk to you offline about it sometime. I'm still kind of wondering how you arrived at that and kind of what the next step is to take advantage of that.
So in my mind, I'll just go really quickly. It shows we've never done branding the way that we've done it in the last year. I think we've kind of rested on our laurels and just assumed that people would see the universities as a great option and understand that there's 13 of them. I think the research that you and Bogost and Adams and all helped me put together a couple of years ago was that we found out that wasn't true and we couldn't rest on our laurels. And if we just got our name out there in a way that people understand it, we would start to be considered an option. And I think that's what we're seeing. And what we're seeing is a very soft market in higher education, whereas if we present ourselves in a collective, clear way, that we become an option. So what we saw was kind of the static snapshot before we did a campaign, and then 6 months later, after we invested resources, people were moving away from kind of where they were historically toward our universities.
Thank you. That makes sense.
I'm going to go to something I said this morning in Budget and Finance because it was raised here again in a couple very good questions. I am hopeful and I am optimistic that the legislature and the governor will do the right thing by us, and I believe they will. But we're fiduciaries. We have obligations. Hope is not a strategy in and of itself. So for the next meeting, I would like President Rothman at least a general outline. I don't want specifics, because I've dealt with financially distressed large organizations for 35 years. We have limited options. This is up to elected officials. We are appointed officials. Elected officials make decisions in democracies. We must follow those decisions. We can raise tuition. We've already heard that that's not a great option. And I'm going to say these things out loud. We can cut personnel. We can cut programs, either academic or otherwise, or we can close facilities. I'm not aware of any other options. I hope you think of some, but I would like on our next agenda at least a beginning of an outline of what we would need to think about if we don't get more money. I think that's prudent. I think it's necessary, and I think we need to talk about it before. I don't want to, the turkey in the first week of Thanksgiving always says what a great year it's been. I mean, first week of November, right? First week of November, the turkey says, this has been a great year. Everything's going wonderful. Yeah, I don't want to wait till the third week of November. So that is my request, that at least you get us something preliminary in an outline form to start considering, because people need to think about, what if, because not always, I'm hopeful. I really am hopeful. I've talked to the legislators, I've talked to the governor, but I think we have a responsibility to go, what if, because we are not in control of that process.
Yeah, I think that's a fair request. I'm still trying to make what I should take from being compared to a turkey just before Thanksgiving, but we'll leave that as it is. I think, Regent Nixon, a couple things. Very fair ask, but I think there are some policy decisions involved in that, because you heard Julie talk about our universities right now are moving toward eliminate those that have structural deficits. They have done terrific work to get them. So we're getting to the point where we are sustainable at some level where we're at. The policy decision beyond that, in my mind, is what are you not going to invest in because we don't have the wherewithal to do it? Whether it's people, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's quantum computing, those are the decisions I think we have to, that this board would have to make, because that's above my pay grade. That's
And I'm
the
looking
policy
for you
side.
to outline those for us.
Okay,
That's what I want.
all right, fair enough, I will do that. But I think it is beyond simply saying, because I think, can we get to the point where, okay, we can proceed, but there is a cost to doing that. There is a cost to academic excellence. There is a cost to being able to support the students that could benefit from the social mobility. There is a cost to be paid by the employers in this state if we don't do this. Do we survive? Yes. Do we survive in a way that we are serving the state of Wisconsin? No, and those are the things that we can talk
And
about.
that's what I'd like you to at least outline for us, what those things are that we can. I am going to be optimistic that it doesn't happen, but I think we have a duty to at least think about there's no organization in the world that doesn't do downside analysis, right? That's just everybody that does work. So I think I'd appreciate you bringing that stuff, and I'm hoping you're a lot smarter than I am and come up with really cool answers.
Okay, I just feel like the turkey just before Thanksgiving again, but that's okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going back on my word. There is one last question from Regent Weatherly. And this is an important discussion, so if we can hang in there just a couple more minutes, I appreciate it.
Hold on, we're finding if my mic is on or not. It is, in fact, on now. Jay, I'd like to friendly quibble with a few of your green lights. First of all, in strategy 3, increase overall compensation to be competitive with our peers. This is important to everyone I've talked to in the Wisconsin community, regents, staff within UW's leadership, everyone at the universities, legislators. There's not a single person that I've met that doesn't think we should pay our employees a fair wage. Yet, with what we've requested, what I hear from you is we're 10% below market, but we've requested 5 and 3. Does that really get us to being competitive with our peers within the time frame of the strategic plan?
We've requested 5 and 3 in terms of pay plan, and then we've requested a market and merit adjustment pool, so that the total overall increase over the period of the biennium would be approximately $290 million of an increase. Does it get us all the way there? It gets us a lot closer, and I think that's why it's green. But listen, the fact of the matter is, this goes to yellow or red pretty quickly if the answer is there's no increase and you got to do what you got to do. You're left, and that's why I tried to, at the beginning, articulate to say, where we are currently, are we trending in a path where we could achieve it? If the answer is there's going to be no additional investment made in the universities of Wisconsin, we will be left to deal with tuition increases and what additional cost reductions we could make to try to get there. But as a policy matter, we can't increase tuition. We can't cut costs enough to get us to that marketplace. It's just reality.
Got it. And then on the first slide, going back to our Pell eligible, the goal is 35,000 by the end of the strategic plan. We're right now at 25 and change thousand. So we're about 10,000 away that we need to close the gap in the next 3 years. Do you think that is still achievable? Again, within the context of the way that we're funded, and I will go back to, I believe everyone in the state of Wisconsin believes that we should be providing a ladder up to everyone in Wisconsin, particularly Pell eligible Wisconsinites. So are we on the path right now to increase it by 10,000 in the next 3 years?
I think if we got a tuition promise in the way outlined in the budget, it would put us on a path to potentially get there. Should that be green or yellow, we can quibble over that. But to be candid, I mean, we have sent some really strange signals to the marketplace. We said in 23, 24, you have a tuition promise. And the next year, you don't have a tuition promise. The year after that, you have a tuition promise, but it's at a much lower adjusted gross income for families. And we don't know what the incoming class in 25 or in 26 would have. So I think there is a possibility of achieving that. I'm not giving up on that target because that's the one that, in my mind, really drives social mobility. But, you know, if you were to say, I don't think that's a green, that ought to be a yellow, I'm not sure I would disagree with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Let's take a 15-minute break. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for hanging in there. Okay, we're ready to go. We're ready to roll. Okay. So as we've just heard, one of the objectives of including the strategic plan is the elimination of any structural deficits at each of our 4 universities by 2028. President Rothman, I believe you'd like to say a few words about this.
I do, and we're going to go back to the strategic plan, specifically strategy number 5, that requires us to ensure that our universities are financially and environmentally sustainable so that they can be positioned to fulfill their strategic missions. As the board knows, in July of 2023, the UW's administration engaged a third-party consultant, Deloitte, to conduct a financial assessment and operational review of each of our universities other than UW-Madison. The intent was to assist the universities in financial planning, forecasting, benchmarking, and addressing revenue diversification opportunities. After completing the assessments of the universities, the project then followed up with an analysis of UW's administration. Today, we have with us several representatives of Deloitte who will provide an overview of the insights and opportunities identified during the course of their assessment of UWSA. To start us off and to set the stage, I've asked Julie Gordon to provide an overview of UW administration, focusing on our organization structure, functions, and budget. I hope this level setting will be helpful for the Regents and provide the context, as our Deloitte colleagues will then provide the insights and opportunities identified in their assessment of UW administration. Following the Deloitte presentation, we'll have Julie Gordon return along with Johannes Britz to address their findings and our response to those findings and the actions we intend to take in response to those findings. So with that, Julie, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, President Rothman. As President Rothman just said, we thought it would be helpful to do a little level setting. We work pretty closely with you all to describe a policy, to brief on an item before one of your committees, advocate for our higher education needs in the state of Wisconsin, but we probably shouldn't have the focus on us. Our focus is rightfully on the campuses where the instruction's being done, where the research is being done, and hopefully we're, intentionally a little bit in the background, and we don't have that drill down into who we are and what we do exactly. And so before we turn it over to our Deloitte colleagues, we thought that that may be helpful to provide. So. When we talk about who we are, I think talking about our people, again, whether you're on a campus or within UW administration, our people do continue to be our biggest asset. And so what exactly do we do and what are our people working on? So a significant portion of our employees provide direct services that would otherwise need to be completed and conducted on the campus level. This is beyond, again, just the Office of Shared Services. Some of the examples here that I've identified are the Office of Learning and Information Technology. When you hear about IT as a service, networking as a service, those types of services provided and functions provided. I think General Counsel may be the special Kool-Aid that Regent Nixon was referring to, and the great services that they provide to our campuses as well. So direct services are a large portion of what we do, but we have a number of other offices that are providing what I will call more of a hybrid, where they're providing some direct services, but also serving in that management or oversight function as well. Just to give one example, I have a few of them identified here on the screen. To give one example, though, the Office of Compliance and Risk Management, they actually do our processing of workers' compensation claims. They also conduct our Title IX investigations. But as you may have seen in the board packet or heard if you're on the audit committee, they're also very involved in our insurance programs as well as our overall risk assessment process for the enterprise as a whole. So really those hybrid functions. As of this fall, UW administration employed roughly 523 full-time equivalent employees. It could sound like a lot, but that is 1.5% of the total employment, and many of those positions are funded through grant or other program revenue funding that we receive. Identified here is the Office of Business and Entrepreneurship, which receives quite a bit of funding in federal grants. This slide provides a visual of UW administration and the organizational structure, and I know it's an eye chart for those in the audience. I apologize for that, but it's just meant to provide a general sense of our structure, and noted in yellow are the positions within each of those offices. This is a more detailed listing and just another depiction of the services and functions provided by UW administration with some additional information on those specific departments. I'll highlight just a few that are literally highlighted on the slide here. Go Wisconsin within the Office of Enrollment and Student Services. I think we've heard about this in the past, but it provides an online front door for our applications. This platform is really a one-stop shop for all of our students to learn more about a campus or to actually apply to any of our UW universities. And without this platform, every university in UW, the universities of Wisconsin, would need to replicate that function. Also highlighted here is the Department of Financial Administration, which serves many functions that are really needed because technically we are one legal entity, so they are drawing down our revenue from the state of Wisconsin. They are preparing our financial statements. They are preparing our tax returns that are needed and managing our banking contract, just to name a few of many items. And lastly, I'll highlight the Customer Success and Operational Communications Office or Department within the Office of Shared Services. This, again, one of many things that this department does is the training that we talked about earlier and the good work that they've done to repurpose positions and develop that training function that we've identified as being needed. So at the time that we contracted with Deloitte, there were discussions about benchmarking, and we did not include that as part of what our ask was of Deloitte because we were already in the process of participating in a survey that's being conducted by two higher education professional organizations. Based on preliminary findings, we're hoping that this study is publicly available soon, but based on their preliminary findings, we found that UW administration compared very favorably to the average of the 17 other higher education systems that responded to the survey, including, I would note, higher education systems that we would consider very similar to us, such as the University System of Maryland. Specifically, as noted on the slide, UW administration incurred expenses of approximately $868 per student FTE, while the average system responding to this survey was at $962. So while we're talking about expenses and costs, it kind of naturally leads into and will raise questions about UW administration, what our budget is, and how we're funded. As with everything, it seems, in higher education, there are many slices to this pie, many different funding sources that contribute to our overall budget. This slide provides provides the total budget, and there are a few that probably just deserve a little bit more attention or explanation before I get to what is a little bit more than 50% of our budget being the general purpose revenue, or those GPR as we refer to it, and being the state dollars that we receive. But looking at the other slices of the pie, a few that jump out to me that I thought you may have some questions about. Tuition and auxiliaries are often things that we talk about at the campuses that gets a significant portion of our annual budget as we look at tuition and rates that our universities are charging. So why does UW administration have that in its budget? The tuition portion of about 5% of our budget for fiscal year 25, $9.2 million, are not funds that UW administration will retain. This is revenue generated by our universities, but at the time when this revenue was identified and included in the budget, there was some uncertainty as to how expenses would be directed and what initiatives, if any, we wanted to focus as within the universities of Wisconsin as a whole. Did we want to do something such as a tuition promise with this money? Was there something along those lines that we would consider putting these funds towards? Since then, and because of that, those funds were included in the UW administration budget. It was never the intention that they would be expended by UW administration. Those funds have since been pushed back out with budget transfers to the campuses. This was really more of a holding place as they were held in our budget, not to be expended by UW administration, however. Auxiliary is another one. This is our athletic conference. That is the only thing that's in there. We are not taking money from universities from their housing or dining or their auxiliary operations. It's largely the WEAC conference. Federal indirect costs, that's what we affectionately refer to as FICR, the red slice on this pie. That is the overhead funds that we receive for federal grants and other grants as well. Largely this portion comes from UW-Madison, and it funds certain things within UW administration, such as purchasing, HR, and those overhead related expenses. General operations, about 30% of our budget is largely our shared IT platforms. This includes things like our current finance and HR system, as well as Canvas, our learning management system. And then lastly, gifts, grants. Again, one example here would be our Office of Business and Entrepreneurship, which has grants from small business development centers and things along those lines. So that kind of gives you the other half. I know I ran through that fairly quickly, but I really wanted to focus on our GPR and the money that we receive from the state. So drilling down into that more of the UW administration GPR budget. This is just now a pie chart of just that 51% of our budget that we had in blue in the previous slide. Nearly 1/3 is transferred to campuses, and again, similar to the tuition that we talked about before, is not actually incurred by UW administration. There's some examples listed on the left-hand side of this slide. The one at the top, I think, is probably of the most significance in dollar amount and maybe most fresh in our minds, and that relates to the workforce development funds. This was funds that were cut from the UW Universities of Wisconsin budget and then returned as the Joint Finance Committee released them back to us and directed that they be spent on workforce development programs and initiatives. That funding was released, I believe, in April, I want to say, and as a result, we did not have time to get it into the budget in time. And so again, this was a placeholder within the UW administration budget, and as the year began, those funds through budget transfers were transferred out to the universities. That was for fiscal year 25. As we roll into fiscal year 26, that nearly $16 million will be included in the universities' budgets, and our budget will automatically drop by that nearly $16 million. The very small slice of pie that it, just to round it out and make sure we were totaling 100%, is the Secretary of the Board of Regents. As I said, a relatively small amount, less than 1%. It is the dedicated staff and the board activities. Nearly 25% or $22 million is for shared services and contracts used by our universities. This includes the office titled shared services, but also other collaborative services such as IT services, memberships and contracts that are paid at the UW administration level for all campuses. Some examples would include, again, a contract that we have with a vendor called Campus Guard. They help us with all of our PCI compliance that's needed to process credit cards. It requires quite extensive work, and we pay for that within the UW administration budget to provide assistance to all the campuses. Also included in this would be a contract that we have with KPMG to help file tax returns that are needed. We don't have what a corporation would have, obviously, but we do have a number of tax returns such as unrelated business income tax. And then we have here nearly $33 million of UW administration departmental budgets. Many, if not the majority of these functions, again, would still need to be completed at the campus level if not done centrally. Try to put a few examples on this slide, at least a few more, ones that I hadn't already included elsewhere and that you maybe haven't heard 3 times today in other presentations. So just a few other examples would be our planners, architects, and engineers within the Office of Capital Budget and Planning, IT staff who manage our library resources, they investigate our cybersecurity breaches, and manage our strategic IT procurements. Legal, we've talked about a little bit today, and also I'd highlight trust funds as they oversee our investments and distribute earnings. And then again, rounding it out so we get to that full 100% and the pie is complete. The last sliver is at the top of the chart here, about $4 million. And these are contingencies, again, to support unforeseen circumstances or opportunities that may arise. Recently, our Office of Compliance and Risk Management has worked with campuses to fund a crisis call center. So we have that option available. Campuses can tap into it when there are occurrences on their campus and they need that assistance with communications and the like. I would also highlight here our Title IX advising and outside counsels, where we just are often uncertain if they will happen, and if so, to what extent and where. So that is included within that $4 million contingency as well. And with that, that's meant to give you that high-level overview of what UW administration is and what we do. Happy to answer any questions for you if you have them.
Any questions from Regents before we go on?
I will hand it
Thank
off
you
to
very
our
much.
Deloitte colleagues.
Excellent. Thanks, Julie. So over the next 15 minutes, my colleague Gabe and I will share an overview of the report following our final assessment, which at the request of President Rothman focuses on the University of Wisconsin system administration, as Julie just walked you through. This report is the culmination of our work over the past 18 months with the universities of Wisconsin. And in this capstone, we examine the system administration, identifying opportunities to improve the effectiveness of the system's activities in service to the state and to the universities served. Note that Madison, your flagship, has been largely absent from our work to date, a fact which continues here. The opportunities we share today are informed by both the gaps we identified across our assessments, that is where individual institutions would benefit from further support, as well as from focused data collected in conversations we conducted specifically with the system administration and with focus groups of leaders from across the system. One further element of context before we begin, as we look at system administration as compared to individual universities, there's a difference in the availability of success criteria. When we look at success criteria for an individual university, we can clearly point to longstanding metrics, graduation rates,
progress towards a degree, retention rates, outcomes post-graduation. No such success metrics exist for systems. Systems across the US look and function in radically different ways, including in what autonomy is accreted to the system administration, the set of institutions served, and the scope of system services. Traditionally, system offices have had a policy remit, functioning as a loose affiliation of highly independent institutions. Often systems are referred to as a collection of strong, independent universities. However, the role of systems across the US is rapidly changing, with an emerging focus on a concept of systemness. Boards are driving towards this from two different perspectives, either from a position of dire necessity as costs outpace revenues at some systems across the country, particularly in the Northeast, or as an opportunity to exploit the scale of the collective system as a competitive advantage. As I go through our findings today and the path forward, I'll ask that you keep this framing in mind. The findings here are really about how UW can continue to evolve towards that systemness mindset. Reflecting on the past year and the individual assessments conducted at the 12 universities, it's clear to us that the University of Wisconsin's are dedicated to serving the state, improving access to higher education, and contributing to research and public service opportunities. This is evidenced by the more than 164,000 students enrolled and the more than 30,000 degrees conferred annually. However, despite recent enrollment gains that have actually bucked the national trend, declines in undergraduate enrollment in recent years, and a shrinking pool of high school graduates call for changes in institutional operating models and an evolution in how system administration serves the universities. Compounded by a 10-year tuition freeze and the fact that Wisconsin ranks 43rd in the nation in public funding per student, in FY23, there was an overall $63 million tuition fund deficit, which you are all well aware of. Several UW universities are already in the process of implementing institutional realignment plans, as you heard in the strategic planning discussion, with many of those gaps closing this year as well as in the following 2 years. And many of the universities have proactively taken measures to curb expense growth going forward. Our findings are grounded, you can just shift to the next slide. Our findings are grounded in the core challenges that were identified across the 12 universities. It's important to note that these challenges are not new or surprising to anyone at the system administration, and based on our prior conversations with you, I suspect are not a surprise to you. So we will not spend much time here. Beyond these challenges, we also considered the current environmental context as we identified key opportunity areas. The environment that the universities of Wisconsin are operating in is evolving rapidly. The socioeconomic and market forces putting pressure on the higher education sector, forces which you've seen play out at your individual institutions, are driving a need to define what it means to operate as a system in service to the state of Wisconsin and the state's learners, businesses, and communities. In short, what has enabled success in the past will not be the foundation of success going forward. So as the system administration considers its role going forward, we would first look to build on the significant strengths that system administration brings. First, individuals and teams who are dedicated to the mission of the universities of Wisconsin. This was evident not only in our interactions, but also in the focus groups that we conducted of campus leadership across the system. Also, key areas of recognized expertise. We heard about the Kool-Aid that's being shared across the system, particularly legal compliance and policy areas that are recognized by the campuses as strongly in support and highly effective in what's provided. We looked also to the system's role as a service provider for back office administration, although we will look at that also as an opportunity of how that can evolve to better serve the universities. And lastly, we would look at the system administration's willingness to change and to engage stakeholders in hard conversations thinking about the future of the universities. So this brings us to 5 key areas that we highlight where system administration can focus going forward to make a difference in the individual universities. First,
is to redefine the balance of independent, strong campuses. The universities all roll up to a single P&L, meaning that the financial position of any one campus is not an isolated situation, but impacts the financial health of the system as a whole. Because of this, there is a clear need for system administration to hold campuses accountable for a balanced budget. Secondly, decreasing the time it takes to make changes in the academic program array. While practices and policies exist, the system administration needs the operating approach to help universities reach a balanced portfolio in service to the state. Thirdly, improving shared services. While services are provided that reduce the overall cost of administrative operations, there is a compelling opportunity to improve shared services through clearer KPIs and service level agreements, as well as through an increased customer mindset. Fourth, creating more opportunities to shape programs in collaboration with the campuses. While there are clear, long-standing and emerging opportunities for university input, campuses desire a more collaborative approach to system-wide policy and process changes. And then lastly, an opportunity to start with the end in mind. Transparency around the system roadmap for the next 5 to 10 years will help build buy-in and enable individual campuses to align resources to the overall master plan. The authority of the system office and the team come from state statute, and importantly from you, the board. In order for the system to help campuses address the pressing challenges, the role and identity of system vis-a-vis the individual universities needs to be re-examined. As we looked at this re-examination and looked at the effectiveness of the role of system administration across the different operating areas, we started with a hypothesis about the role of system in each area. Different activities and functions across the system suggest different system roles. These roles range from empowerment through control. And the first thing on here, empowerment, support, and oversight, are examples of where the system can offer services, offer tools to support the institutions, with empowerment and support coming through in areas such as shared services, and oversight coming through in areas where the system administration is providing KPIs and monitoring the activities of campuses and helping to report those to you as the board. The final step on here, control, would look at activities where decision-making no longer happens on the campus, but would happen at the system level. So as we take a closer look at 3 key areas of our recommendations, as we're looking at the evolution of system administration, we'll take a look at academic array management, enrollment and financial management, and shared services with respect to these different oversight roles. As noted in the introduction, our analysis demonstrates an opportunity for the University of Wisconsin to strengthen academic array management. And I know, Johannes, you've talked quite a bit about this and noted that there's much work that goes on in the campuses today, including 60 programs over the past year that have been sunset or seen significant evolution. But while Wisconsin statute grants the Board of Regents clear authority over academic array, as we look at the current policies and processes in place, we see that these do not delineate an approach by which the board can fully exercise the authority or which by the system administration can support the board in this charge. You all receive data on an ongoing basis of the academic program array, and yet, as you may recall from our individual campus reports, each of the campuses has an opportunity, and some even have a compelling need, to better align the programs offered to student demand and to the needs of the state. There's several different metrics that you can look at to understand which program should be discussed in an academic array program. One of the metrics that we looked at across the 12 campuses to understand direction of magnitude of the challenges here was the total number of bachelor's degree programs, which, excluding Madison, is around 646 at the time that we pulled this data. And of those, as we looked at those programs, 102 of those programs had declined in enrollment by 5 times more than the average overall enrollment contraction, yet had no substantial program changes reported to system administration since 2018. So you have a situation where you have many programs that you're hearing about, you have activities on the campus, but when we look at the data, it suggests that there is an opportunity and a need to take a data-informed approach to moving the needle more quickly. What this gives you is a situation in which you're serving fewer students as you look at undergraduate major offerings that have increased by 7% more programs, yet total numbers of bachelor's degree conferrals declining by over 9%. So you have fewer students served with an enhanced set of program opportunities, which may be appropriate for the state, but should represent a strategic choice for the system and the institutions. So as we look at the future path here, I don't know if you can shift to the next slide, shifting systems remit to an oversight role, operationalized through consistent trend analysis and clear key performance indicators, will create an opportunity for the board to set strategic priorities for array management. Looking at system administration level opportunities for strengthening academic array management, we've identified 4 action areas, all of which can support an oversight role for the system administration. The first is incorporating a defined set of key performance indicators, having a common definition of success defined in collaboration with the provosts across the system, but a common definition of KPIs for what programs fall into consideration and discussion every year. Refining existing processes to strengthen the structure for monitoring the review of programs, articulating transparent guiding principles to help frame the conversation and decision-making, particularly in regard to low-producing program or low-enrolled curriculum areas. And lastly, a note that any change efforts undertaken should be done through a collaborative process that engages the universities while still reinforcing the board's decision-making authority. Before we leave this topic, I want to make sure we're clear that what we are outlining is an approach to monitoring programs to spark discussion and to spark decisions. It is not intended to be a litmus test of what programs should fall under particular areas. So as you can see, we've outlined 5 different opportunities of, as a program triggers a KPI, what the potential outcomes might be as proposed by the campuses. So there will be a set of programs that may trigger KPIs, but may simply need monitoring. No action may need to be taken. It's perfectly reasonable to have programs that are low enrolled that are aligned to your mission. You will have some of those. On the other extreme, some of those programs triggering KPIs may trigger a conversation to suggest that they should be closed in an orderly and timely manner over time so that students can be taught out. The reality is most of the programs that trigger these KPIs and come to you for discussion would come to you from with a presentation from your leadership team and would fall somewhere in the middle. They would be optimized in partnership with other campuses or other programs. There would be investments made in them to increase the enrollment or collaboration, either within an institution or across institutions. So I want to make sure that you leave here with an understanding that what we're recommending is a data review with clear KPIs and trend data over time that gives the system, the provost, and the board an opportunity for discussion around the strategic trade-offs that you make with scarce resources. I'm going to turn the conversation to Gabe now to talk through enrollment and financial management.
Can I?
Please.
So in this, I mean, really good information, I appreciate it. As you think about that process, and you think about maybe best-in-class organizations, universities that you guys work with, and then you kind of bring it back to our system and the way we operate, what's an appropriate timeline for this process, would you say? I mean, is this a 6-month thing? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? I don't quite have a feel for, we had a discussion before about what's the board's role. You know, is it for system to bring it to us fully baked and we then approve, or do you see the education committee knee deep in this, or kind of how does that process and the timeline work?
It's an excellent question. And I would say for some context, this is not a topic that many systems or higher education institutions have taken up more recently than the past 3 or 4 years. There has typically been sufficient funding to enable growth in the academic and research enterprise, and that has enabled the proliferation of programs, which has always been seen as a good and effective role for higher education. As we move into a time period where resources are increasingly constrained, systems are taking up this question. It is not an easy question. It typically is a multi-year process of starting to look at data and build that trend data and maturing the conversation over time. So early on, you may start with a conversation around a set of dashboard data, and there may be 100 programs that come to you with information from the provost around where each of those programs should fall among these 5 areas. And over time, that conversation will mature as you see programs that were brought to you last year. If it was suggested that they would optimize 3 programs, what does that program look like? You now have the data and information, and the campuses have that ongoing data and information to have that informed conversation. So it's a multi-year process that takes time to build, and I would say is very much a continuous improvement and a continuous learning as you go forward.
So because of that, you wouldn't say that there's a lot of best case situations out there, because everybody's, the last few years, it's been a kind of a thing that's a new phenomenon.
It could take a couple of years.
There are clear examples you can look to. University of Oklahoma system has a effective system-wide policy, but again, they're very nascent in it, and these take time to work out. So even if you identify a program that should be closed, and Johannes, you've identified programs that have been closed over the years, you need to teach out those students. So even that teaching out takes 4 years. There are some systems that you can look to, though, to see where they've implemented similar processes.
Regent Prince had a
Thank you, and I don't want to delay this because I know there's more that's coming up, but to my colleagues on the board, just know that through the Education Committee, we have already established a work group and a task force that I'm the executive sponsor, working with our provost and others, where we are actually going to be looking at academic program array. So you'll hear more about that, and we'll bring it back. And to your point, Jack, is really that the timeline is dependent upon a number of things. And I think we heard clearly from our president around funding. It will be interesting to see what the budget is, what makes sense, not just based on the budget, but what makes sense based on what's good for the workforce in the areas on the campus. It simply isn't, here are the number of students, whether it's declining, should that program still be offered? Depends on the workforce. If the program has 3 students, but they are the students that you want around AI and whatever AI needs to be in, then there's a reason to do that. But you have to be able to have that data, what you just said, to make an informed decision. Is it worth the wait? And what are the priorities? So there has to be input, and it will be a lot of discussion, and this board will have to make decisions on it. So thank you.
President Rothman?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that, and, I remain hopeful, and we are going to advocate to the best of our ability to get funding at the level that this board had approved, even if that occurs, and I am hopeful that it will. But even if that occurs, my view is we have to approach this issue, because it should not be a situation where we throw money at a situation that we need to manage ourselves. And I know Regent Prince on the Education Committee is focused on exactly the same thing. This is the housekeeping that we need to do, because that frees up dollars that we invest elsewhere. And I think that's an important point as we look at this. It's not just getting more money. We have to run as great stewards of the resources that we have, at the same time being advocating for the monies that we need to invest to make ourselves even better.
Thank you. Go ahead. Okay.
Thank you.
As has already been discussed, most of the UW universities have experienced significant declines in enrollment in recent years, contributing to significant financial and operational challenges for the institutions. 7 out of the 12 universities assessed had negative operating margins in 4 or more of the last 7 fiscal years, indicating challenges that predate COVID-19 and its effects. And enrollment at 9 out of the 12 UW campuses peaked in 2014 or in some cases earlier. Fortunately, fall 2023 and fall 2024 have reversed the otherwise near continuous decline since 2014. For example, 7 universities grew enrollment from fall 23 to fall 24, while 5 universities did experience further declines in enrollment. Given demographic forecasts and socioeconomic trends, it is unfortunately unlikely that in the near term, universities will be able to see sustained strong growth in enrollment. This environmental reality suggests that the universities of Wisconsin seek ways to strengthen accountability within both enrollment and financial management, as accurate enrollment forecasts are foundational to financial forecasting and planning for the universities. This oversight role will provide the board with an early warning system of university deficits and help universities to react more quickly. To enable the UW administration to exercise an oversight role, our report highlights several potential actions. As identified through the 12 campus assessments conducted over the last year, there's a lack of clarity as to what enrollment roles and responsibilities reside with the universities versus with the UW administration, indicating an opportunity for the administration and universities to have a transparent conversation to clarify roles. Because campuses have varying degrees of capabilities in regards to enrollment and financial forecasting, there's also an opportunity for the UW administration to build a toolbox of best practices, tools, and training to help ensure that relevant university personnel have the requisite knowledge and tooling to develop robust, accurate forecasts. To help monitor the accuracy of financial forecasts, UW administration can incorporate additional KPIs into its already regular financial monitoring, enabling greater insight into financial performance and timely decision-making. Again, similar to the opportunities identified for academic array management, there's also an opportunity for UW administration to develop and document a transparent approach to ensuring accountability at the university level for both financial and enrollment forecasting and decision-making. And lastly, to help enable practices to continue advancing in efficacy and efficiency, UW administration could help the universities continue to evolve practices by capturing, documenting, and communicating ongoing lessons learned in the annual financial and enrollment cycles to help the UW universities learn from each other.
The last area we'll go through are shared services, which we're looking at broadly, not just as the shared services unit that Julie noted, but all services that are offered from system administration to the institutions across HR, IT, finance, et cetera. And this is an area where it represents both a success and an opportunity for the system administration. So through these services, the system provides services at scale, which the universities no longer have to staff and manage, essentially moving the work from the individual universities to the system administration. As we were undertaking this work, as I mentioned earlier, benchmarking systems can be challenging because they all look a little bit different. We did have an opportunity, though, to benchmark one specific function that the University of Wisconsin is providing to the campuses, and that's the shared benefits administration that comes out of the central HR office. We're working with another system that is completely distributed currently and looking to evolve that function to a shared service. And what we found in that benchmarking is that the staffing is almost twice as much in that distributed model, serving the same number of employees as it is here in the University of Wisconsin, with that shared service across the system. So a clear indication of some of the successes here, where it is more efficient to provide these services centrally. However, we did learn in our conversations that there is an opportunity across many of the services to not only be efficient, but also to be more effective and customer service oriented. You can flip to the next slide, thanks. So a few challenges that we know, and these are not unique to the universities of Wisconsin in terms of offering shared services, there are real challenges to setting up shared services at the system level or at a single campus to be provided across the system. And the first is the fact that individuals operating on the campuses typically have a fraction of their time that's spent on the activity that might move to the shared service center. So in the case of benefits, if you're bringing benefits activity from the campus to the center, you may have one individual that spends 3/4 of their time on benefits, or more likely the campus has 3 individuals that spend 1/4 of their time on the campus. And that reality needs to be reconciled in order to shift the work in a way that doesn't just add FTE. The second element is there is an opportunity to expand shared services, particularly around the HR capabilities here at the universities of Wisconsin. We heard consistently from the campuses that there are challenges with onboarding, challenges with talent management, challenges with recruiting and hiring, and that's a clear area of opportunity where services could be expanded. But it connects well to the next point, and Regent Nixon, you brought this up earlier. There's disconnects across the campuses around perceived value, and there is a disconnect in some cases in the services. And that comes down to clear KPIs, shared understanding of expectations of the service to be provided, as well as a service level agreement and the need for better reporting mechanisms. So the opportunity for when there are challenges to escalate them and to know that those challenges will be resolved through some sort of a governance structure. So some opportunities to improve that. And then the last is really the less tangible piece of that effectiveness, which is a customer service mindset. It's that culture of a focus on what the customer needs and how to provide that in a way that fits within the service level agreement. So three areas that we would look at going forward, and our recommendation here is that the UW admin expand the support role and expand services to campus, but very much focus to, when launching new centralized services, align these services to address a broader set of services to help solve the fractional FTE problem. The bigger the scope of work that you can pick up and shift, the greater the reduction in the fractional FTEs. Secondly, to help reduce the perceived value disconnect, to implement key performance indicators, financial metrics for all services across campuses, create more structure around governance and escalation pathways, and opportunities for customers to provide feedback. And then lastly, to intentionally expand services, particularly starting with the HR roles. So we've talked about our findings. I think before the full report was even into the system, many of these opportunities have been being worked. So I'm going to turn it back to Julie and Johannes to bring you up to speed here.
Can I ask a question before they turn it off?
Yes, Regent Rye.
You mentioned something that I think has come up a couple times, but we never really talk about it out loud. With shared services, I'm curious, as you look across different systems, you mentioned whether it's provided by system or one of the campuses. And that's a key thing, is that there are some key things, especially sitting in the flagship here. Do you have good examples of where shared services are at times provided by the campus to the rest of the campuses in a system where there is a flagship? And what kind of examples are there outside of HR?
So I'll give some examples. I would also encourage you, I mentioned earlier, Madison is absent from our report. I think if you look to Madison, you will find some examples. One example that we did talk about with your CIO is the sustainment model for your ERP, which my understanding is will be a shared service provided by Madison for the benefit of the campuses. So you have some even here within your own system. Other examples I would look at, Oklahoma State University some years ago undertook an effort to provide full HR, finance, as well as disaster recovery services and IT, which is a common one, for the 4 A&M campuses, which are in the very rural areas of the state when it became apparent that they simply couldn't sustain those operations. There's several other examples across the country. The Cal State University system is looking currently at how it can leverage systemness to implement some of these areas. They're looking currently at procurement, and they are looking across their system at what should be offered from the system office versus what should be offered by individual campuses, and where they should look at other solutions.
Thank you. And yes, I know I'm the shared service broken record region. I get it.
Amy, I have a, if I may.
Regent Guido.
Yeah, thanks. Real briefly, I just want to make sure I understand the leadership model suggested for the shared services is the support model, which seems to be a bit more, I don't know, deferential, I guess, in the description. I know that the shared services is in and of itself a support function that would be offered by system, but is it also Deloitte's view that this would be something that is sort of at the discretion of, as the support, support leadership model is defined? I just want to make sure I understand that recommendation.
Our recommendation is, at this point, is that it would be an opt-in model. I would say it bears looking at each function by function to see if that makes sense on a function by function basis. But broadly, an opt-in model fits where you are as a system today.
Okay, so just to follow up, so that's where we are today. Is that the recommendation to continue by Deloitte in that model of opt-in?
It would depend on the function, and it would depend on the system's goals. And I think looking particularly at your ERP services is an area where you've evolved past that. My understanding is ERP is shared across the system, so you do have some examples where it is not an opt-in model.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. We do appreciate Deloitte's observations, and in a culture of continuous improvement, we welcome their comments, and I think not only acknowledge that we can do better, that we quite honestly need to do more. So I'll walk through some of the responses or points to Deloitte's findings on financial management and shared services, and then I'll turn it over to Johannes to cover academic program array as well as enrollment management. So for financial management, we've been continually evolving for a decade or so. We talked about this a little bit earlier today in UW Finances. And when I started, the UW budgets included only expenses. And when I think back on that, it may shed some light on why we got into our balance situation with the legislature, but it also was as Megan said before, it was a little bit of the times that we were in. And we realize as we've come along that we need to do more in this area. We need to provide more oversight. We need to provide more transparency, and we have been working on that. This chart was previously shared with the board as part of the annual budget presentation, and I really share it again today to illustrate that those changes are being made and that continuous improvement is something that we do take to heart. And the check marks note the years that changes have been made. So I'll highlight just a couple of them. There's a number of lines on that table. I won't go through every one, but just to highlight a few. Fiscal year 18, the universities of Wisconsin began preparing budget to actual reports. This was at an aggregate level initially, reporting for all universities as a whole. And in fiscal year 22, we began providing campus-specific information. And we now meet routinely with campuses. Specifically, we meet twice a year as each semester begins and is underway with campus leadership and get a better sense of why variances occurred in those budget to actual reports for the year and what we can do to help address them, help campuses better forecast what those numbers might be. In fiscal year 20, we implemented a budget system getting off of our old mainframe titled Plan UW, as noted on this slide. The system provided forecasting functionality, which you now as board members see multiple times a year. You see it in the spring when you see our tuition and fees being brought forward. You see it in the summer when we have our annual budget come before the board. And then for the first time this year, as part of revised projections that were brought to the Business and Finance Committee after fall enrollment information was known. So again, with the idea of doing more and being better, there are several changes that we are making or considering making for the future. We've already talked about a lot of these today regarding structural deficits, with the universities making those tough decisions and doing that hard work. We anticipate having all structural deficits eliminated by fiscal year 26, ahead of our strategic plan of fiscal year 28. We are now preparing multi-year forecasts as part of our financial realignment plans. And as those plans are developed, UW Administration Finance and the Office of Policy Analysis and Research are reviewing enrollment projections. So Deloitte commented on enrollment management, and Johannes is going to talk about it more, but this is really where it overlaps between finance, the campuses, and academic affairs. As information is brought forward in a budget, in a financial realignment plan, do we all have comfort in the expectations of where enrollments will land? And that was done for the first time this year. We also talked today a little bit about our program revenue balances earlier in committee today. I think there's a lot of questions about, well, the legislature has put a threshold on us for reporting, but where do we think we should be? And that's something I think that we'll be discussing more about, and kind of falls under that last bullet for dashboards and metrics of accountability. How do we provide more guidance that the board would like to see, that we would like to see at UW administration, quite honestly, the campuses want at the same time? Where should those balances land? And then dashboards in general, again, not to pin all of our hopes on ATP and what Workday is going to bring us, but we do anticipate one of the reasons why we went with the system that we did with Workday is the additional reporting capability that we're going to have. We've been having conversations with campuses already on what they would like to see, what we could pin to a dashboard that would help them in their day-to-day management. And those conversations will be continuing with the campuses as well as with Regents and others. So that's a little bit about where we see going in this area in the near future.
I think Regent Rye has a comment.
Actually, after shared services.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So for shared services, we continue to believe that we can leverage our scale, our size, and we can reap the benefits of shared services. That does not mean that we are doing this as well as we should right now. I think really if you look at us as a vendor who are providing these services, would the campuses contract with us again? Do they value the services to that extent? I think in many cases, yes, but I fully recognize that in some cases that answer may be no, and we need to work to improve that. So some of the benefits of shared services are noted on this slide. Cost savings, I think is a great thing to have, and I think it does occur for some of our shared services. I want to emphasize, though, the two circles on the right, because while cost is important, we have to also look at the quality and the resilience that we're adding often with shared services. Megan addressed some of that quality. If you've got somebody doing something for 5 or 10% of their job and it's very complex, involves regulations, do they really understand it? And quite honestly, even within UW administration, with the grants that we have, we are not the grant experts. We have contracted with Madison to do that work for us because we had one person who was on an island and didn't have the support around him or her to do that. So that made sense for us, and I think that same theory applies for shared services in general. For resiliency, I think one example to identify here is some of the good work that's being done in our IT area and our security operations center. Really, if we leverage our scale and a contract together and are able to implement those security operations centers to have 24/7 monitoring of our networks, that we can see when somebody's trying to get in at 2 in the morning on Christmas Day, and having that 24/7 coverage provides us that additional resiliency. we kind of got into this a little bit, and President Rothman alluded that I'd get into it more right now, and so I'll touch upon this here, a little bit of the background of how we got to where we are. And this is not meant to make excuses, but just really to provide that context of that our shared services really have grown organically. They are located across various offices within UW administration, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that right now we have various means of contracting, communicating. Our services were often developed on an ad hoc basis. This sometimes occurred when a campus would come to us and say, my procurement director just left. They were the only one on our campus doing that. Can you help us out? And then that would kind of grow and kind of mushroom from there. But that has resulted in some of the fractional FTEs, as well as other things. But this has, the nature in which these opportunities are identified has resulted in those fractional FTEs. And then lastly, I'll just mention that, again, because we're under different supervisors and different offices, we don't have a consistent service level agreement with consistent metrics and key performance indices. And those are the areas that we're working on improving going forward. So looking at really what we're going to do going forward, I see improvements, and we've already been working, this is not me, this is our team as a whole, listening to the campuses. Many of our folks who oversee these shared services routinely are out on campuses meeting with them. Vice President Patton and I, being new to our positions, are going out to campuses as well and asking, as we have those campus discussions, specifically in this area. What are you finding of value? What are you not? How can we improve? And based on all of those discussions, really kind of 3 key areas that we think will be helpful to focus on going forward. This one here in this slide addresses our strategy and governance. Again, all of those listening sessions that we've done, but getting down to then a plan for the distribution of that work. And that was mentioned earlier, I think, by a few people of where does this work occur and who should be doing it going forward. So that might be Madison in some cases, that might be UW administration. There are some things, quite honestly, that should remain on the universities. And so making sure we've had those discussions and that we have come to some consensus or consent on where these, how the work should be distributed. And then coming up with that strategic plan for implementing those services, so we're avoiding that ad hoc situation, we're avoiding those fractional FTEs. Can we bring them on in such a way that we're coupling a few things together and doing it in a way that truly benefits and provides that ROI to our campuses, where they can look at doing with less on their campus as a position becomes vacant, not filling it, or moving a position to UW administration. If we are taking on a service for all of the campuses, we may be able to use our good employees that we had at an institution and bring them to UW administration. Obviously not all of them, but as we look at this, doing that in a very strategic way, and then establishing service level agreements as well. Customer success is another one. I'm hearing more from institutions and the universities, which is great, about what's working well and what's not. We need to have that process built in and having that continual loop of feedback. So looking at how we can build that transparency and that feedback and put that in place. And then lastly, with metrics and KPIs, there are some areas where we have great information. One identified here is some of our success that we have for how many customer tickets do we have? What's our turnback rate on expense reports? We have a lot of information. That's not the same for all of our service areas. So working with our stakeholders, our customers, what would they like to see? How can we improve in this area? And so those metrics and KPIs, just to ensure that we have that level of transparency and accountability going forward, is going to be very important. So all of this we see really bringing together under one umbrella. That does not mean that it's all going to be located under one supervisor in one area on one university, but it means that it has to appear seamless. and work for our customers. And so that governance structure is being identified as well, obviously with university stakeholders being the primary representatives on that, within that governance structure. So I haven't touched upon the implementation for all of these. The one on customer success is a little phased. I think the bottom line, though, is that all three components of these improvements that we're looking to make within shared services, we anticipate being done by the end of this fiscal year. So we are up and running for fiscal year 26. This last slide, sorry, is just an example. You know, you get tired of just seeing text and reading screens. So this is just a picture to demonstrate some of the KPIs that we have around expense reports. So we can drill down into how many are in the queue. We can age those that are in the queue to say how many have been there between 0 and 5 days, 6 to 10 days, more than 10. We can do this by campus. We can look at return rates and why expense reports were returned, so we know how to target our training as well. This is something that we just need to replicate elsewhere. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have on shared services, Regent Rye.
You just knew it was coming. Actually, I'm going back to my esteemed colleague from Business and Finance's question around opt-in. You know, as a board, I think we need to have this conversation more than the recommendation around it, because the opportunity is there. And if you go to chapter 36, section 0.01, parent 1, last portion, and which promotes internal coordination and the wisest possible use of resources. It is our charge in chapter 36 to do this, in my mind. And I do feel that we need to set expectations around the progress we're going to make. And it's great that we're going to implement by July, and I understand Regent Nixon's concern around customer service, but I think that's also being addressed.
We're going to buy Kool-Aid.
But at some point, you know, we need to set expectations as a board for what is going to happen as a system, because it literally is our charge and is the system's charge in writing. And I feel that, I don't know, maybe it's been 3 years and we've talked about it a lot. I think, Kyle, you remember my first meeting ever at Business and Finance? I asked a bookstore question, and you leaned over and you predicted I would never get an answer to it. And you're right, I still haven't. You know, we at some point as a board have to set the expectation, I believe, for this to be successful. That's just my personal opinion, but I do believe we need to have conversation around that.
Can I just slightly, because I think I gave you a very unsatisfactory answer, and I apologize for that. But one of the questions that you should ask as a board when you think about that mandate is what problem you're trying to solve.
Exactly.
And that should define whether it's an all-in. And unlike a system like the Vermont State College, which is the main system, you have a set of institutions that have different needs, and that needs to be evaluated before you make that strategic decision of opt-in or not opt-in for particular services.
And I think to that, you know, we don't really have a list of what could be shared, what should be shared in front of us that we could set priorities. Or, for example, I'll think of something that should be mandated. Not that I'm saying we should, but just an example. Say shared services around cybersecurity and the infrastructure around cybersecurity and the expense around that. This board should have a discussion around setting priorities. Maybe cybersecurity is a lot more important than bookstores or food service. But at some point, we need to be able to say, this is what our expectations are.
Regent Weatherly, sorry.
Hi, going back to program array, can you just help me think through something I really struggle with, which is your bullet point about us adding more majors yet having declining graduates. I get it, but then I also look at like the example of, I'll say the market, in this case I'm referring to the students, typically speaking are looking for more bespoke majors. So 30 years ago, we might have had 100 econ majors. Now we might have 40 labor economics majors, 40 environmental economics majors, and 40 vanilla economics majors, served by the same population of staff at the same cost, yet we are offering degrees that are more focused on what the students ambitions are, and potentially what the labor force is working for. In the example I just gave, and admittedly it was custom made that would look bad in the framework. So how do we actually identify programs that are truly low enrollment, costing more than they should? There isn't market demand either on the student side or on the market side, versus us offering more degrees because they're actually more customized to student demand.
And I know Johannes has thoughts on this, so I'm going to answer quickly, and then I suspect you're going to get into this.
I have no thoughts.
You are right. There are very good reasons to offer low enrolled programs in some particular areas, and there may be good reasons to have a whole host of degrees that are low enrolled. There may be reasons geographically because students will come to a particular catchment area and not to another area. What we're suggesting, though, is for those low enrolled programs or those low enrolled degrees, you should have the conversation and make that strategic choice to acknowledge, and that information needs to come from your management team. It needs to come from your provost and Johannes to understand why these programs, having a low number of majors, makes sense for the system and fits with your overall array. But our suggestion is to have a focused conversation around those that trigger the KPIs.
And what do you suggest we start looking at just in terms of cost per degree? Are we, I mean, you know, in my economics example, right? That example, our cost per degree would actually be going down, right? Because I'm holding labor constant, right? So what are the things that we should be, because it seems relatively simple to just say, how many majors are we adding versus how many are we taking out? What are the other things that we could be looking at? Is it cost per degree for a particular major? What are the other things we should be looking at?
You could certainly look at cost per degree, but again, there's very good reason to offer degree programs that cost more and may not have a net margin to the system. Nursing degrees, healthcare degrees, very important to the state, very expensive to deliver. You know, a set of metrics that is small enough that you can understand them, 5 or 6, that you look at on a regular basis. And I do think that you should look to your provost and to your management team to understand what those metrics are. It could be number of students enrolled in a major. It could be particular courses, number of courses that are low enrolled that fit within a major or a set of meta majors. It could be faculty credit hours and productivity. Johannes, I think you have a list that you're working with. I might turn to you, please.
I don't know if there's another question before we go to academic program array management. Because I will allude to that.
Regent Nixon has a question apparently, but just before you start, I think they're shutting off, hold on, they're shutting the heat and electricity off at 5, so we have a few more minutes left.
Oh, good. No, I just
That was a joke.
I wanted to comment that.
We want to get out.
No, she just wants me to be quiet. One of the issues I've seen come up is, for instance, music and theater, which is an important part of a lot of undergrad liberal arts education. So your engineering student wants to play in the band. They want to do a theater, okay? But do you provide a major in that? But you still need to have enough of, and Chancellor Alexander went through this at Green Bay. How do you give them music? How do you give them theater? Maybe you don't have, but you got to have a critical mass of faculty to be able to provide that, even if you don't have a major. And I'm sure Regent Prince's committee is going to come with full answers to all these issues.
Regent Prince.
Thank you. I want to allow you to delve into this, so that might help set the context and the tone for what is actually going to happen in education. And Regent Weatherly, right on point. You know, those are the kinds of questions that we have to dig into, and those are the difficult decisions that we're going to have to make. It's all of what you're saying, and it's none of what you're saying in many ways, because we have, I won't get into my soapbox because I'll do that in education and then come back in here. But I have a very solid concern, but also understanding of the issues that may or may not be outside of our realm to do some things with. It's not a black or white issue, but in this day and age, we have to make some serious decisions, and they need to be based on more than just how many people are enrolled in it. So let me allow you, if I could, Madam President, to let him actually talk about the academic array, which may lead us into even more questions. It's very helpful for education.
So, Regent President, I'm in the hot seat, but I'm getting so cold now because I think they've already turned off the air. I just want to say on the academic program array planning, thank you for Deloitte. And again, this is not just the report that they sent to us on program array. I read through all the campuses, so you get a good sense where you go with low enrollment programs that might cost more enrollments, etc. So it wasn't new. I just want to tell you again that the provost, I'm very proud of the hard work that they do to manage their programs, their faculty, the tenure, enrollment management, working with one another to manage also the efficiencies and the strategic alliance of their campuses to meet the workforce needs, right? And you have what you have, and to Regent Jack's point, it takes time. You have a new program, it takes 4, 5, 6 years to get your enrollments. That might be added in. You get a program that you need to phase out, that takes 4 years just for the students to graduate. You might have a faculty member that eventually will retire, and you say, once that faculty member retires, this program might just, and we might actually look to another campus. So there's a lot of context and complexities when you talk about program array management and the starting of programs and the closure of programs. The provost has been involved in the last 2 years at least in very in-depth strategic discussions to change our process, the SIS 102. You've heard last time when we did it on purpose so you could be better educated to really truly understand the complexity, the intricateness, the in-depth of program array management. There's a lot that happens on a campus, even before it's a notice of intent. We had a new notice of intent that we started about a year and a half ago with Kate Burns. I look at you, Kate, you were kind of on that committee. We started doing this year, and after a year we said, let's review it. So there's a team that reviewed the NOI, the notice of intent process. Does it work? Is it good enough? Is it really working? And yesterday they spent, a long period of time talking about that to reshape, so they're continuously busy by improving what we do. The other challenge and context is, how do we work together? Where do we collaborate? Who starts which program? So there's a lot of discussions. I want to tell you that again on that space with our provosts. We actually, thanks to Laura Reynolds and Maria Cuso, they are working diligently on a document for you. We're editing it so you have it in hand and say, you think about duplication, this is what you have to think about. You think of collaboration, this is what you think. You think about elimination of programs, this is what you think about. You heard also last time when Provost Maria shared with you Superior's model. Not every campus has that same rigorous model, but they look at one and say, wow. So there's also a discussion on program elimination and program suspension matrices that's being used on campuses. So this is just as an introduction to tell you it's happening. Whether we are perfect, certainly not. Whether we understand fully, you get this program, certainly not. There's a lot of tough discussions, but we have never said, no, we are not going to work through that, right? So I just want to say that as an introduction. I think the third bullet point there was for me also very important when I look at what Deloitte had in their report. I didn't just look at 148 or 194 programs. I said, it's context specific. I really need to get a deeper dive into the methodology, whatever. But for me, important is that you as Regents, based on that statutory granted authority, you as the Education Committee actually play a key role when it comes to program approval, right? I normally approve with the work of the provost just for them to start to plan it. That's with us. But once it gets to that approval, it ends with the Regents, right? That's in the consent agenda, or you can pull it off the DSC. That's done. But the elimination or suspension of programs is a system kind of policy. SIS 102 says every year there's a report that comes to us on the report list, and it's not a good matrix. It's a matrix that can be used, but it's, to your point, not the only matrix. We look at 5 graduates over 5 years, then we say it's low enrolled, you need to give us an explanation. There's a 1 or a 2 page here. It ends up to the president, to me, to you to look at, but you don't see that really, right? And I think that is one thing, the accountability towards the regions was missing, right? And so what we then said with President Rothman and what Regent Joan, when I said, are you willing to be a co-sponsor? Absolutely. So she's the co-sponsor. I don't think we ever had a regent as a co-sponsor. But this time I said, for the Education Committee, it is critical. So we have now formed a a work group. And I asked Betsy Morgan, Provost Betsy, I don't know if Betsy is still here. There's Betsy. And she was willing, and it's a lot of work. But on top of her work, she said, I'm willing to chair this because it's so important. And then I got the faculty rep, who is currently the chair of the faculty group, Nelu Chano, I always say his last name wrong, but he said, absolutely, we have a vice chair, faculty member. The work group is 4 more provosts, 2 CBOs, another faculty member. We're going to charge them later this month, in December, and they're going to start their work. And those are the things they're going to look at. One bullet that's not in there, and I did talk to Betsy about, we're going to do an analysis, what is actually happening on campuses on their own internal processes, right? Just get that information. Which campus is doing what when it comes to the elimination? And as I can tell you, I won't say positively surprised, because it's always sad when you don't have enough enrollments and you think, but how did we end up eliminating and suspension another 60 programs? Each one of those was tough decisions to make, right? But we do it, it means there is a process on every campus as they work through. Some better, some others not. That's what we're going to look at. We want to update our policies and procedures. And then, to Megan's point, we're going to look at metrics. The one we have in system to say, you look at graduate numbers, yes, but it's lagging, and you just look at who graduates. You don't look at any other variable. So we want to make a more rigorous process when it comes to when does a program needs to end, or then I just always called it shelving. You put it on the shelf, maybe you can take it later off, maybe you just leave it there, suspension of a program. So they're diligently going to look at metrics. And then I think, just in interest of the weather, I'm just going to say in the end what I envision will happen. The other important part is that second last bullet, collaboration. I think that's the area where we can improve. But we just need to say, can we have a really good number, I think 12 or 15, just look at the nursing program. Nursing deans came together and they work together. So we really need to reevaluate where can we work together. If there are low enrollment programs, do we really have to close them, or can we rather say, listen, we need to work together to sustain and actually link up? If you have a faculty, maybe at a place that's close enough, can we not share faculty in the way that we hire? So those are the things they are going to look at. And then in the end, we're also going to look at the recommendations to Regent's Prince's point is to say, what's the role of the regions? Just as you look at the list of approvals, would it then end up, and I'm not talking what Betsy might come up with later, but I envision at a point we might have to say, for this Regent meeting, these are the programs that we suspended. Because when I learned 114 last time, I forgot it. I said, oh boy, I need to look at this more. I didn't look at the 60. How would you know that? Because we really don't share that, nor are you involved to say, oh, okay, this time, these are the programs. I can see it's not that you micromanage, but that oversight based, just as you have that oversight role in terms of the approval. So that's in a nutshell the thinking at this point, and they're going to start diligently their work. And thank again to Regent Joan Prince, who said she's willing to be a co-sponsor for us on this work. And then we will report out to the President, bring it to the Education Committee, and then bring it eventually, Regent Joan, I assume, to the full board, right?
Regent Walsh.
So when I joined the board in 2019, I was on the Education Committee, and one of the big tasks that we had was, at the time, approval of new degrees. And we asked a lot of questions at the board meeting about some of the programs. Some of them seemed repetitive. Some of them couldn't answer questions like how much of this can be delivered online or in cooperation with another school. And I was told very specifically by your predecessor that that was none of the board's business, that the campuses spent 2 years or more developing these degrees, and they push it through all of their processes, which I understand are considerable. And to have someone come at that stage and start asking questions, I get that it wasn't working well, but it went way too far in the other direction. And I come now from a mindset that I'm supposed to be paying attention to this, yet I was told years ago that it wasn't any of the board's business. So, there's a change that has to occur here, and if this board is going to take a more active role in program array, we have to find a way in the process that works for the campuses and the folks that are doing that, and the folks that are the enforcers, I guess you would call us, or the people asking the questions. So the culture here, as our president says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And this is one of the areas where it's a pretty big buffet and we aren't not at the table.
And I think that's what I will leave to the committee, because that's part of the charge. We need to look at that and look at that role of the regions when it comes to the program. Because at this point, it's a delegated authority, right? And actually, the matrix we use in the system is just that one. And it's a document. And we need to change that.
Well, think about it. We went from talking about each new degree to a consent agenda, which I don't know if anybody's ever pulled something out of consent agenda. I haven't been on the education committee for quite some time. But these are all questions I would have if we're going to dip our toe into this pool.
Yeah, I would just say I still like the consent agenda idea, because I do think there's a lot of deliberation happening ahead of time, and we meet with the regions individually.
With the regions.
With the regions, with the education committee regions, and it can be pooled, because there's a lot of work that's happening on a campus that I still would like to see preserved, but I would like to see that oversight role as we have it now for program approval, but it's lacking, and I think that was what Deloitte pointed out. What about elimination and suspension, and what's the criteria we use?
And what can work? How can we as a board add value to this project?
Yeah.
President Rothman.
Yeah, Regent Welch, the one thing that I would envision in all of this is that the board, as the policy-making function, would create and approve the metrics. And then that would allow the process to proceed, and it may be consent action. It would be fine as long as the metrics are being followed that the board has set. And that's how I see the division kind of occurring here. So you're not down program by program questioning it. You have set forth the ground rules, and then it's incumbent on us and the universities to ensure that those ground rules are enforced.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's what I think hopefully will be the space we move into. And then Regents, the last one is just on enrollment management. I just have one slide there and I don't have a pointer here, just to point you to actually the slide. In terms of accountability and enrollment management, in terms of the implementation of the strategic plan, chancellors do have targets. They are accountable towards the president, right? Every campus has their own strategic plan, they have their own goals that they set, and enrollment targets, since we are so tuition-driven, aligns with the budget targets. So there is that level of accountability because it's in the strategic plan and the chancellors do report out to the president. I think that's the baseline. Below that, in my office, what we do philosophically, culturally, is really to how can we continue to support, coordinate, and share best practices for the chancellors, for the campuses, to enable them to be successful in reaching those targets. And I've listed there 21 different activities that we do and initiatives and strategies. I'm not going to list them all to you. I'm just telling you, for example, behavioral health. We take that lead. Direct admissions, dual enrollments, the tuition promise, I can list them all. It's 21 different activities we do to empower a chancellor. Hopefully, whether we communicate effectively, there's a lot of stuff that we can still improve on. That's true, but that's our role. And then on the left side, I did put that in there. There's 17 line items that, as far as I remember, since I came into this role in 2010 with the Regents, that is very significant. That's the budget ask. And hopefully, if we do get that funding, and I don't want to over say number 42, we want 41,000 graduates. If we don't get that funding, but we ask for that funding to empower us even more so we can reach those targets. And that was kind of the response also, how we can continue to improve what we do in our office to support enrollment management. And that's kind of just as in a nutshell, the slide.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Appreciate the presentation. One last question from anyone? All right. Thank you so much. That was excellent. We are adjourned, and we'll be back here bright and early tomorrow at 8 a.m.